think I will call us to order.
Let me get the record going for you.
All right, welcome to our July board in-service meeting. I'm going to call us to order at 6:12. We are all here, which is wonderful, so we've got a quorum. Tonight's meeting purpose is to really the board education around Robert's rules and ends. So we've got 2 guest speakers tonight, accept the annual agenda, and we have a couple of other regular meeting things. We had a large pile of policies that I would like to get out of the way before we're in budget season, so thank you for enduring through our pile of policies that have to get approved this year. I am gonna open for general public comment, and we do have a couple members of the public here. We don't have anyone else online.
Nobody else is online. Nope. Kyle's online and Orton's online.
All right, I'll give it a moment. Do you have any public comments, Kelly?
I do not.
All right, then let's, I guess I will have you introduce yourself. Thank you so much for coming, we really appreciate it. Ryan actually brought this idea up as we struggle almost every meeting with, do we need a motion for that? How do we change a motion? Anyway, we are not experts in Robert's rules, so we're happy to have you come and speak with us tonight.
Thank you so much for having me and for having this idea. I love it. My name is Kelly Green. I live in Randolph. I am an attorney. I'm a criminal defense attorney. And I have a passion for parliamentary procedure.
Good for you.
I've never said that out loud. There's no judgment in this room to anyone, so thanks. I'm the town meeting moderator, and I've been doing that for a number of years. And I am not an expert on Robert's rules either. It's vast.
I know you did.
So I prepared a little very, very short talk, 3 minutes. I want to go over some basic things with you, and then I want to find out what's on your mind and sort of offer to give you continuing help, even if, because the way you learn this is by doing it month after month, and I can come and sort of watch and help, and that's kind of how you have to learn it. I mean, unless you want to read it, which you do. But okay, so obviously and I'm forgive me if I'm starting out at the you're probably more advanced than this, but this board is considered a legislative board. You are a type of deliberative body, meaning you meet and you make decisions that affect people. And you should adopt rules of order of some type. Rules of order, generally speaking, rules of order are rules that govern how meetings are run. They can make meetings more efficient if you know how to use them well. They can make meetings more fair, and a good set of rules of order balances the rights of all of the members of the group. So let's talk briefly about that for a second. The members of this group are the elected board members, right? You're the members of this board, and you have a chairperson. Sometimes some of you are in the minority on issues, sometimes some of you're in the majority on issues, but good rules strike a balance to make sure that the body, everybody's individual rights as a member of the body are respected, even if they're on the sort of losing side or minority of something. So this matters a lot when you have a big meeting, actually, but it can matter in small groups as well. Robert's Rules is the definitive parliamentary guide that most groups use, or most groups. Mostly it's by custom. But Congress uses Robert's Rules, and you may be familiar with, from reading the New York Times. Sometimes I read the New York Times, and there'll be something about like a budget reconciliation motion that, there's, you know, it's pretty complex stuff that goes on if you know how to, you know, if you're, you know, they're applying the rules in Congress, and it can be complicated and it can have giant, different outcomes based on how you amend stuff and how you put stuff off and postpone things and strike things and so forth. So it gets quite complex. Boards like school boards should, my word, adopt some type of rules of order. You might adopt Robert's Rules of Order and be like, hey, we're a board that uses Robert's Rules. It absolutely, like I said, it's definitive. It has an answer for every possible circumstance that could come up that you could think of, and all the ones that you can't think of. There is an answer in here for it. But it's pretty dense. You can, there are other guides. There are several other alternatives to Robert's Rules, and I can't even remember the name of them right now because everybody just uses Robert's Rules. You could adopt a simpler version of Robert's Rules. So here is a copy of Robert's Rules of Order in brief, which is a simple guide. I purchased this copy for you to have.
Thank you, and I think we have
we get
these,
it.
they're issued to us.
Oh, they are,
Yes.
that same book. Well, all right, so, but
This is
that,
awesome.
yep, you can leave that
It
one,
has
that
everything.
has
It
my,
does, I was like, I'm giving this
Look
one,
at
yeah.
that.
it has my contact information in it.
Yeah, that's great.
There's no reason why this board couldn't adopt that version of Robert's Rules as its guide. It will not cover every possible thing that might happen in a meeting, but I'm pretty sure, if I had to guess, you have most of the ordinary things that most boards do every day. You don't have these rare things. You can also write and adopt your own rules of order if you want. And you know, in theory, I could help you with that. And maybe you do that over time. Maybe you start, you know, maybe you would write and adopt your own rules and add to them or change them as you see fit, as things work or don't work. And you can adopt parts of, you know, Robert's Rules into a written document that you have yourself, and they can be quite simple. Because I'm guessing you kind of do the same things over and over again. And I'm gonna try to attempt to teach you the rudimentary basics of what I think you're probably doing, meeting after meeting, also. Finally, I would say this. A lot of boards, if you haven't formally adopted something, and to be fair, I have not read your policies. I haven't looked into state law. I haven't looked into any other places where something might be already telling you, like you may have already adopted rules of order of some sort.
We have meeting rules of procedure, but it's pretty, it says we're gonna follow the Robert's Rules for small boards.
Okay, well, there you go.
And it
So you
says
have
a few
adopted-
things about motions and how motions, like the chair can, I'll pull it up.
Well, I'm not gonna be able to read it right now and understand, but it sounds like you have already adopted, rules, and
Yes.
it says you should use Robert's Rules.
Yes.
Okay, so that's good, and if you ever wanna change that, you could just write your own or whatever, you don't have to stay with that, but you can. Okay, that's good to know. I was gonna say that many boards have not formally adopted rules of order, and in that case, what we do is we rely on custom, and that happens every day all over the world, and that's also okay. And often in that case, when we're relying on custom, people will raise points from Robert's rules as persuasive as to why you shouldn't do something. And then someone has to decide. So that's, you know, we do often rely on custom. Okay, you have a chairperson, and under Robert's rules, you run the meeting, and and what that means under Robert's rules is that you go down the agenda. You probably go down in the order that the agenda appears, and you put things on the table. Some of those things are for discussion only, like the superintendent wants to update you all on construction at the elementary school. And some things require action, like we need to vote on whether to purchase a new school bus or not. That's probably a bad example. Can you give me an example of something that you would
That's
vote
a-
on?
No, that,
Oh,
we have
that
done,
is-
We have done that.
we have done that.
Okay, yeah, so you have to vote on and take a vote. The rest of you are members, and you don't have to do, I always like to remind groups of this, and it's somewhat subversive, you don't have to do anything on that agenda if you don't want to. So just because your chair says, okay, point number 1, the superintendent is here tonight and he would like to give you an update on the construction at the elementary school, any member could say, I don't wanna hear it. I'm bored of that subject. And can move on, right? There are rules for that scenario. You're not required, it's subversive, right? But the board, you're not powerless people sitting
No,
here.
this is great.
Like you are elected officials and you represent the people, and you're not just sitting here like lumps, like you have power and authority on this board. You don't just have to, he writes the agenda, she's reading it to you, and you have to go down it. You can move to move on or whatever. Anyway, that's in Robert's rules. Okay, so I thought what we should do is maybe start with public comment. This is becoming a hot topic in town. Public, under Robert's rules, it's in the section called public session. That's what they call it. They don't call it public comment, but public session. This is, most legislative boards or elected boards representing people have space for public comment. And I opened up my book actually. I'm just gonna read to you what it says, because I opened it up to read it to myself and I was like, hey, it says, in meetings of many public bodies, such as school boards, the public may attend. I'm like, oh, I better keep reading, right? It says, some bodies like school boards may invite non-members to express their views, but this is done under the control of the presiding officer, subject to any relevant rules adopted by the body and subject to appeal by a member. Often by rule or practice, time limits are placed on speakers and relevance is closely monitored. That's super duper good advice. You should, I haven't read your policy there about that adopts Robert's rules, but you should, I advise you to have a couple rules about public comment. Maybe you have
You've got a
them.
We
great,
do, and
We
they
have
Yeah.
10.
Okay.
you got a great preamble.
Yeah, and that typically when we have had a lot of public, we read that at the beginning, and it's that, you'll remain respectful, try to avoid duplication in your comments. Comments are directed to me, the chair. What am I missing?
Time limits.
Time limit, 3 minutes.
Don't
So I have to
swear.
dig my
You
mind
told them
around.
that we can't respond to them.
Yeah,
Yeah,
they
that's
were
right.
not able to respond during that time. I mean, I generally thank people for their comments, and then,
Although we can direct them to somebody, that's one of the other things we say.
Mm-hmm.
We can direct them to the person in the
Like,
organization.
oh, the person you need to talk to is this.
Yeah,
Yeah, I those sound like perfectly good rules, and if those work for you all, great. You should think of those rules also, those seem like perfectly fine rules. I was going to add, make them generous. And, because the Vermont Constitution, Chapter 1, I think Article 6, says, I wrote it down, all offices of government, whether legislative or executive, are the people's trustees and servants. So you all, as members of this board, are trustees and servants of the people. So this public comment stuff that keeps broiling up in town, I advocate for publicly elected people to remember that the Constitution demands that you are servants of the people. So when people are coming in to speak, it's important. It's an important part of what we're doing.
So I remember one meeting, I don't remember when exactly, but I remember it was at Randolph High School, and we had a dozen-ish people in the audience, and there was somebody asking a question that one of the people that were in the audience was the teacher that was in charge of that she could immediately give an answer rather than saying we can't respond. And honestly, I truly appreciated that as a part of the public, because I don't think we should just say, no, we can't respond, when the answer is right here, right present, only takes a minute.
I tend to agree with you. And it can get tricky. It's fine when everyone's agreeing and getting along, right? But it does get tricky. I don't have an answer, but I tend to agree with you that it can be extraordinarily frustrating. We've all been a member of the public for something, right? And it's just unbelievably frustrating when you go to you've elected these people and they won't answer or won't, you're like, are you kidding me? Like, so it can be good to have those rules. Sometimes it's better to be generous, but when you start making exceptions, and then you're making exceptions, and so it's fraught. Okay, so there's probably a couple types of, I call them articles, but what do you call them on your agenda items? There's probably a couple types of agenda items that you have. One is, those are items, and forgive me if I just keep saying articles, because that's just what I'm gonna do. Agenda items that invite discussion, and then there's agenda items that invite action. And you see I'm saying invite. Again, you don't have to take up any of them. But be careful.
And I think we started to try to be more diligent when we know a vote is needed, putting like action on the line, so it's sort of awareness. Is this a discussion item, are we getting information versus something we're gonna need to take action on? So we've been trying to indicate that on the agenda in the last year and 6 months, and I feel like that's been helpful.
Yeah, that can be helpful. Yeah, absolutely. Again, an agenda item inviting discussion is the superintendent would like to update you all about the construction at the elementary school. Under Robert's rules, I'm gonna show you how that can happen. There's different it's vast, 700 pages long, and sometimes it makes meetings longer, right? But the official way, so that is treated, that agenda item is treated is like this. The chair says, okay, item number 1 is on the construction project update. And then you just sit back. Someone, a member, has to move the discussion to the floor. So I move that we open discussion on this item.
And if we're following Robert's rules from that big book, they have to stand up to do that,
It's
right?
it's possible, I don't know,
Yes.
but it's possible, yeah, that could be.
right?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, so I think that if you get into the weeds of the Roberts rules versus the Roberts rules for small boards,
Yes.
you're gonna get yourself into trouble.
Yep, but I think this would even be in the small board rules, is this process of saying, I move to put the discussion, to open the discussion on item 1. And I say that because that gives the body, that gives members of the body to say, I object. I would like to postpone this until next week, or I never wanna hear another word about this. So there are objections that members can make to even discussing that, like you don't have to do that. And we can talk if we want to, if you all want to, on those types of objections. I don't think that probably happens for you. So, but there are motions, and that actually is one of the hardest things about Robert's rules in Vermont, is when someone, believe it or not, it depends on when the person has made the objection. So you have said Article 1 is about an update, someone could object then. If not, someone will move that we discuss it, open the discussion, and then someone could object. Or not, maybe it gets seconded and someone then objects. And those are all treated differently under the rules, so you could really go crazy. I suspect, like I said, I suspect that doesn't happen. I'm gonna tell you something for you to remember. The general rule with Robert's rules and all rules of order is that when you're voting on something, whether to buy a school bus, the majority rules, right? All those in favor say aye, those opposed nay, the majority rules. When you are talking about cutting off speech or cutting off discussion or consideration of something, meaning taking away another member's rights, like this is on the agenda and I'm just like, we're not gonna talk about it, and you're like, hey, come on, we gotta talk about it. If I am moving to just cut off someone else's rights to consider something, then you need 2/3 agreement. You need more agreement from the board. That's sort of a general principle. If you're not able to follow the whole book, a general idea is votes are, majority rules. Cutting off speech or terminating the meeting or something requires 2/3. Okay, that's just a general, that's why I say, I'm like, ooh, you could write your own rules and it could be simplified. But what really happens in your meetings is this. You say, item number 1 is an update on the construction. And what you can say, if you're good at reading the room and understanding your body and understanding the custom, and you come month after month, and you know that we're gonna discuss this, maybe for just 5 minutes, you can use what's called unanimous consent. Robert's rules, and that's probably in the short guide, has something called unanimous consent that the chairperson can use. And that's when you look around the room and you're like, if there's no objection, let's talk about this.
So that would mean we wouldn't have to go through the whole motion process.
Correct.
Okay.
Yep. If someone says, I really gotta pee, and I don't wanna miss this next thing, you can say, if there's no objection, we'll take a 5-minute break. That's called unanimous consent. And you should read that rule, because it helps, well, it looks like we're done tonight. If there's no objection, we'll adjourn. This takes care of a lot of stuff. If you have the vibe, if you're reading the room right, and you have the vibe that no one wants to talk about item 6, because for whatever reason, you just know, if there's no objection, let's skip 6 tonight. If there's no objection, let's move 6 to next month. That's unanimous consent, and that is very helpful. You should definitely learn that one. That's
And I think we've used it, although I didn't.
it's implicit.
I wouldn't have known to call it that.
Right.
Yeah.
That's right.
So there
So
have been times when we've had extensive public comment and it's sort of like, if there's no objection, we're gonna skip our own policy review tonight and
Correct,
on.
and everyone's like, right, I gotta get home.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that is a really good way, especially for a small board, to keep things moving. And, you know, that's really great, okay. Items, agenda items involving voting. I read the rules today, did I mark this one? Yeah, I did, so I think because you are elected officials and you are making decisions for the public, that you should be using roll call for voting. Because you are elected officials. And as a vote, I'm telling you as a voter, I wanna know who voted up and who voted down. So you can read about, and you could go to the library and get the big book too, to really fully understand. You could look up roll call. But I think it's an important one for you to know. And here's how it goes. You have a secretary?
Oh, yeah,
Okay, so,
And how-
yeah.
so what you might have is a pre-printed list of everybody's name with 2 columns. Yes, no. That, a checklist that you just have, a stack of them at all times. And so when an article or an agenda item is, shall the board purchase a new school bus? Technically, what needs to happen is a member of the body needs to say, I move that we purchase a new school bus. And someone else says, I second it. And then the chair says, all right, this is open for discussion on the floor, right? And then a discussion takes place as to whether you should purchase the bus or not purchase the bus. And then, when you sense it's time to vote, the discussion is winding down, then you can do the roll call vote. And I'm just gonna read you the script right from the book. And then I've also made a simpler version, but I hesitate to even read this, but it cracks me up. You could change these things, but you know, it's just, as many as are in favor of the adoption of the resolution to buy the bus, as their names are called, answer yes. Those opposed will answer no. The secretary will call the roll. And then you go down the list and say each person's last name. Kaplan, and she says yes. You check yes. And so forth. An easier way to say it, I was like, how do you say this in plain English? If you are in favor of the adoption, if you are in favor of buying a new bus, say yes when your name is called. If you're opposed, say no. And then, again, the clerk or secretary checks a form. And maybe the top of the form has what the motion is. So you write in, you know, this is for, you know, to purchase the school bus. And then there is a really good record, and there's a million ways you can do this. This is kind of the way they do it in Congress. There's a roll call, Senator so-and-so, how do you vote? And then you know how people voted.
And what about abstentions?
There are other options. So there's yes, no, present. Someone can be present but not voting. That's an abstention.
Okay.
Someone might be absent, and I'm not sure. I'm sure there's an answer in there, but probably a box that says, you know, not present. It didn't say anything. Wasn't here. Yeah. So I'm not trying to give you more work, but you know, that is the way the rules say to do it. That's in my view. And you could probably read them yourself and be like, ah.
I like the transparency for our community. I also know that a lot of our votes are unanimous. I wonder if there's a way to only do this if it's clear that it's not, like, You know,
Yes.
once we've done the initial.
You are correct.
Like if we anticipate it will be controversial.
I mean, or you could just take, I mean, I'm imagining, I don't know if this is right, that you could like do the vote the way that we've done it, and then if it's not unanimous, then we do the roll call.
So Kyle puts him in, I actually was just looking at our notes from last month, cause I couldn't remember if she calls us out.
And
She doesn't, but she could, so we don't, that would be, she watches a recording, so it would be easy to go
Right,
back and just
right.
double check.
got it.
Yeah, so that role, so this type of body, we don't do that at town meeting, it's a different type of body. We do voice vote and sometimes anonymous ballots and so forth, but this type of body is more legislative than anything, and the voters should know how you're voting individually on something. And meeting minutes would reflect that, and if it's unanimous, they could just say unanimous. This was my basic presentation. What can I help you with? Again, I could come and some bodies, Congress, for example, the House of Commons, or a lot of legislative bodies, actually have parliamentarians on the payroll. And they just are there all the time to sort of help with this. I'm happy to do that for free.
I'm looking at you because you've had some specific questions in the past, but also don't feel pressured to.
No, I think that we run into a problem when we don't really know when we're supposed to discuss something. And I think a lot of this has cleared it up, and I think we've gotten better at it, where, the motion happens, the second happens, then we discuss. But I think there have been more than a few times where we're like, hey, I have something to say about this, but there's no motion on the floor, there's no action item. What do I do here? Do I just start spouting off? What's going?
So give me an example, so that's a situation where like agenda number 3, you announce it, you're like, agenda number 3 says this,
Mhm.
and everyone just sits quietly?
Well, not necessarily. So agenda number 3 says this. Here's some more context, and then all of a sudden, hey, I have an idea about this.
Yeah.
Right. This happens pretty often.
So this is the motion, someone moves, so your chair says, this is what item 3 says, someone should, take that with a grain of salt, say, I move that we open the floor for discussion on this. But this is a great place for unanimous consent. This is where you say, and again, I'm teaching you the rules, and I understand that, like how it goes. But you could say, item 3 is a discussion about new desks. If there's no objection, I'll open the floor to discussion. I do that at town meeting.
Okay, I'm really thinking like we're past that point, and now we're kind of getting more into, like, hey, we've begun talking about the thing. Like, it's clear that we are going to discuss item 3.
Okay, yep.
We're clearly talking about it, and then Martha, has happened with you before, and it's always appreciated by me. Where you're like, I just want it to be known. I have an opinion about this thing, So that kind of thing, like.
Let it rip. Just
you
during
just let that
discussion,
rip?
let your
Yeah, okay.
opinions out.
Okay.
That's what the
Yeah.
discussion aspect of it is you can say whatever you want. Yeah.
I think the big thing with that is the relevance to the conversation. Like, Martha sometimes will have a thought in her head about something that's either coming up or that she wants to talk about that's not directly relevant to that specific thing.
It was.
No, his
Okay.
specific thing maybe, but there's been a couple times where you want to talk about something that was going to come up in the later part of the meeting or something tangentially related but not directly relevant to the topic.
This happens all the time in meetings all the time. And so that's a good subject. So now I understand. So Robert's rules require, another fundamental principle of it, is that the discussion or amendments, if you're amending a motion, or if you're discussing something, it has to be germane to the motion. So what that means is relevant. germane means relevant. So if someone makes a motion, I move we purchase a school bus. Someone cannot say, I'd like to amend it to build a playground.
Mhm.
It's not germane to the motion about the school bus, right? It's not relevant. You could say, I move to amend that we purchase a red school bus, because I'm sick of yellow. That's germane. So if a discussion subject is hiring a new superintendent, so agenda item number 3 is hiring a new superintendent. No one should bring up at that time building the playground.
You know, I think that
It's not germane. And you, under the rules, are like, I'm sorry, that's not appropriate at this time. You have a section for other business, or you can say, hey, that's item 7.
Yeah, we usually open, this is a special meeting tonight, but generally we would open with any changes to the agenda. That's usually part of it. I also think too, I'm wondering what you're grasping at, and a lot of times we need information and discussion before we have a motion for action.
Sure.
And so it's sort of fuzzy, like, when is the line to actually, so we get to this place of like, do we need a motion? What should the motion say? Who's gonna call the motion?
And I think that's really fair, because right now I do think we kind of live in this place of like a discussion sandwich, right? It's like, here's the agenda item, we're going to discuss it, and then eventually you get to a point where like, well, I guess I'm looking around the room for a motion, and then we do it, we have a second, then we have a discussion. I think we gotta just like streamline that maybe, I think was the point of this.
Yeah, and like, how do we balance that with making sure people have ample opportunity to discuss, or do we save a lot of that discussion for after the motion?
So I'm trying to understand the nuts and bolts, because I think it's important, and I can also meet with you separately and go and figure it out, like, we don't have to figure it out right this minute. I'm available to help. But is that a situation where, okay, the discussion is on purchasing a school bus, the discussion is on transportation needs. And then you're like talking about transportation needs, and it becomes clear that everybody thinks you need a new school bus. Should someone move to purchase a school bus? Is it like that?
I think let me give a more recent
Yes.
example that's, I think, where we live sometimes, is there is really a lot of momentum around education reform. And so there's all of these new committees that are starting, there's all these new regions, every month it's an update. And sometimes there's actions that we have to take, like assigning somebody to be on one of these state committees, or selecting a delegate of the superintendent to represent something. And so it's like you need the education to understand, the education or be brought up to speed on whatever has happened in the last 4 weeks since the last time we went, which sometimes is a lot. And then, like, the action that you need to take is this. Does that fit what you're thinking about? You're making a scrunchy face.
No, I think that does fit. And I think like kind of my takeaway from a lot of this too is, in the past few meetings, is I feel like we all just need to be a little bit more empowered to like take the initiative to make these motions.
You are empowered. Like it's there's no one else. It's you.
Right, and we've definitely been motion shy in some ways, but I think that we're now getting to a level of, frankly, competence with this board that it's clearer now how these things work. Like, here's the agenda, we're gonna discuss it. Is there a motion? Yeah, I got a motion. Boom, bing, bang. Second discussion. Cool, moving on. Because, I mean, one of the things that I think slows down our meetings too is that we do get just like, we get into these long discussions that just ramble and meander. And I think eventually, like, I think ultimately, what I'm taking away from this and from the past few meetings is, at a certain point, someone just needs to move.
I recommend that
Call the question.
I recommend that you for your agendas, if you know what action items you need to ask for before you draft that agenda, just write it on the agenda. Just say,
We've had, yeah,
Mike's usually very.
May I give you an example?
yes.
So on tonight's agenda, number 4, monitoring the organization, there's an end report, second read, right? And it's got action after it. If you were in a meeting with a bunch of superintendents, so when I go to my superintendent's meetings, when we got to that motion, Jeannie has been at these meetings. It's as soon as
Yeah.
the chair say, we're on to item number 6, there would be from the crowd, I move to approve the end report. There would be a second, that's literally
Yeah,
would
and
happen
then the
in 10
discussion.
seconds, and then the discussion
That's
happens.
correct.
And that's where all of these other movements happen.
Yeah.
I see.
Right?
I would
Okay.
like to help you write your next agenda. Who writes the agendas?
and Michael and I.
I'm happy to help write, because it's not, I read this and I was like very unclear to me what's going on here. But if you are a professional meeting goer and it says action, for me as a Robert's Rules freak, I would absolutely, if you announced, okay, item 4 is monitoring the organization. As a board member, I would say, I move that we end the, you know.
You probably
This is,
would, so what you're, I
Yeah.
think what you've got two things working in conjunction here. You've got Robert's rules and you've got your board policy governance and the policies that because you're a policy governance board that you have to work under and the expectations. And so I think Kelly's giving you the example of a strictly Robert's rules and not the integration with your own board policies. Because if you said, I'm going to not monitor the organization this month, you would be in violation of your own policies.
yeah,
And so those are the pieces where these things interplay with each other. I also think that as a policy governance board, if you got into the board meeting, the example that got used earlier, if you start saying, I want the buses to be red, I'm gonna also switch into your governance policies, I'm gonna ask you to go back and look, and I'm gonna remind you that you don't make operational decisions. And so, you know, I think that there's,
but those people could still just vote no then.
they can,
Yeah,
sure,
yeah.
they can vote, they can vote no or yes, and
Yeah,
probably under state law, they can do it anyway, but they will be in violation of their own policy governance,
yeah,
which then has other implications for how they've agreed to operate and how the superintendent agrees to operate with them. I would say at that point, you would have a rogue board, if that's what was happening.
yeah.
And they would be working against their own
Can I speak
policies.
to the merger a little bit?
Yeah.
This is not my presentation, but Kelly's suggestion that a motion actually be written on the agenda, I don't think would be in conflict with policy governance.
Sure.
And the board doesn't have to follow that motion.
No, right, they vote no, and
Well, they don't even-
there may be grave consequences.
Somebody may go to head of that motion and say, I vote we not approve any school buses because I don't ever wanna suspend a dime again.
Right,
And they could undercut that motion, that's
Right.
fine. But if you're
Yeah.
you're recommending that the language of the assumed motion be written.
Yeah.
Just to speed through what Ryan's saying.
yeah, so then
But-
a board member can make a motion, someone could second it,
Yeah,
and then a discussion can take place.
and in that discussion, I think.
You
what
can say you
Mike was
have to do
talking
this.
about, that conflict can, yeah, this is a routine.
Don't you dare not do
Yeah.
this. And then a vote takes place.
But Kelly, they're my boss, I'm not theirs. All I get to do and have to do by their policy, through their policy governance, actually, my executive limitation would be when they're not following their policies, I'm required to tell them that they're not following their policies.
Or state law, or.
You know, I think that this was really helpful in that, you know, your example, Michael, was really helpful in that, you know, we have been, I think, sometimes working with the implicit assumption that when we need to really discuss something thoroughly and then we make a motion. But in your example of monitoring the organization with the ends report second read, like, we get to that, cool, I move that we accept it, second, great, now we're gonna discuss it if that's a good idea or not.
Correct.
But whereas we have really been working with this, I understand, like, let's discuss it, and then we'll come up with the motion, and which just takes a long time, and then we have double the discussion.
I think that like last meeting was a really good example. We constructed the agenda with some information, and Ray was great because he was jumping to the motion part of it that was happening down a little bit later because it was connected to, absolutely connected. But the reason that it wasn't there was exactly so that you could get down to the motion part where you would actually make the motion and you'd have the base information that you needed as a discussion piece. So I've been the superintendent of two different well, one was a supervisory union, so I had 8 boards there, but on that one in Essex Caledonia, I literally every agenda, the chair and the vice chair did not make the agenda. I made the agenda, submitted it to the chair, and the chair approved it. And that's how that happened. And in that one, that board, most of those boards in Essex Caledonia requested that I put a motion that they could make on every single thing that had a motion. And then the other pieces were labeled either discussion or information. The difference being if it was information, we weren't gonna talk about it. You were gonna get the information from me and we were done. And then discussion, that opened up the board to have a discussion or action was that. And then in Grand Isle, they didn't want motions written on, they didn't want the superintendent telling them how they should think or what they should say or whatnot, so that wasn't there. And you guys have bounced back and forth. There's been a couple times where in my board report, I won't put it on the agenda, but on my board report, I'll give you a potential motion that might be helpful. So,
And I'll comment that oftentimes they are, because they do cut corners on a lot of unnecessaries.
I personally, if I were on the board, would like a proposed, because I do know that much of what you do is very technical.
Mhm.
It's not like, shall we purchase a bus? That is not, as a terrible example, like, it's much more technical. So I think having a proposed motion, straight up,
Yeah,
you know, and call it proposed motion.
and when you've done that, it's worked, like, and it hasn't felt like you've been leading us around by the nose
And
either.
we've made tweaks to motions before that were.
Yeah, you
That
can
were written.
amend and you
Yeah.
can vote it up, you can vote it down, you can also vote to table it. Like, you don't have to take up anything just because it appears on your agenda.
No, and we've definitely written out like a verbatim, when we go into an executive session, there's a couple of times that there has to be 2 specific motions, so we know that's happening, it's like typed out on the agenda, someone literally reads it, cause it's too hard to remember.
Well, I'm happy to help any way I can, if it's reviewing an agenda in advance or coming for more meetings, to sit in the way back and just, or sit right next to you and whisper or whatever, like.
It probably would be good to have you come to
I'm
one of our
happy to.
meetings and just like, essentially judge our efficiency with
Okay,
this stuff.
yeah. Yeah, I
Like,
can do
right? I
that.
feel like that's a fair thing.
I like to,
Great for
I
you
like.
to say, it's not the chair, Ryan.
Judge our
Don't take this personally.
No, I am, because it is a collective thing of like, you know, when we're hemming and hawing, it's not because of you or your
No, I know that.
leadership.
Yeah.
It's like, you know, it's 9 PM and we're like, what
Oh
are
my
we
gosh,
doing here?
Exhausted, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think we've also run into things recently, like, that we've not had before, like amending a motion or withdrawing a motion, like that came up recently, and that hasn't happened in the 2.5 years I've been on the board.
Yeah, you're welcome for that.
And if I have time, do I have time, I can talk to you about amending a motion really quickly.
Should we
I think,
continue on? When did we say?
I can train you individually, I can talk to you more outside of this meeting, that people who wanna know, like, I'm free to do whatever.
I think we're good.
Yeah, I think we're running a little bit
Yeah,
late,
great.
but I think we probably will take you up on that, and
You got me.
I have your contact information, which is awesome, and I did read a good portion of this when I started on the board, but it's probably good to go back to it now that I've been in practice.
Yeah, and I have a chart that I mean, I don't know that, this is
Oh,
my,
that's cool.
yeah, it's mine, and I have used this piece of paper, I don't know, it's so old, I've had it for years, and this is what I'm doing at town meeting, and it's nuts, but I could copy it and kinda walk you through
That'd be
it.
interesting, that.
Yeah, that would be great.
Cool, thanks very much,
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much.
thanks for having me, it's like a highlight of my summer.
That's how I feel about policy governance.
If there's no objections, do people wanna take a 5-minute break
There you
to
go.
shift things around to get rid of dishes or
Yeah, you're welcome.
stretch your legs?
Is there anybody that's going to want ice cream, or shall I pack it away?
I'm gonna have some blueberries, but I
think I'm gonna have more ice cream.
am gonna have ice cream.
I'm having your ice cream.
I love it, but it
The raspberries were picked this morning, and the blueberries were picked this afternoon, some of them.
I mean, I
I
love
had
ice
to
cream,
give
but
them
it
away because they
doesn't,
didn't have enough for the bush to.
doesn't digest that well for me, so.
Oh,
And then the ice cream had to go with it, you know?
Oh, yeah, I thought it was yogurt.
Well, it sure looks that way now.
I mean, it took me.
And there's chocolate sauce if you want that.
I saw that.
You are pretty nerd.
I'm surprised, your raspberries are in a little early, or is it just your variety?
No, they are a little bit early.
Yeah.
Not a whole lot, but a little bit. But this is just the beginning. I got tons to come on.
Yeah.
Very nice.
It's a fresh cut. I just noticed my black raspberries today are starting to darken. I'm so excited.
Ours, we've been picking them for a few days.
Really?
It's super early.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, I don't remember them coming in this early last year. Well, we did have some pretty early heat this year.
Yes, yeah, last week was.
All right, let's see how quickly I can move to to approve your ends report.
Sorry.
What happened to you?
Uh-oh, a lot of groaning coming over
Yeah,
here.
did you fall down or something, old man?
No, I almost died this weekend. though.
What? No.
Yeah, bug bit me. I got a really, really, really bad infection.
What?
Yeah.
What did you tell me?
Bug?
Well, can you bring you chicken or
What
something?
kind of bug?
Do what?
I would have like brought you food or something.
Oh, no, I went to the ER.
No.
Sunday.
Are you able,
No,
should I
Wait,
sign
that
on to
one-
your Zoom meeting
because
if you
it wasn't there anymore.
share
Yeah.
presentation?
Went to bed,
Jump right on and you can
I woke
present.
up,
That way I
and there
can
was
control
a
it?
virtually necrotic spot in my leg. And I was on the board. And I wasn't gonna risk fireworks, because my son was looking forward to it, so I pushed it out until Sunday.
That's why you're so grumpy looking on the 4th. Okay. So why didn't you stop?
I made these cookies. I did. They're excellent.
I think it was a brown recluse. That's the only necrotic causing critter around here that.
I love the confolder pizza. You'll see that a lot. I appreciate that.
My weight was almost 160.
Good, spectacular, Jeannie.
Wonderful.
Your what?
Your
Blood pressure.
Your blood rate? No.
agenda.
Oh, that's like resting for me. Let's go.
And
My resting blood pressure is roughly like right there in the
we
120
could just put the
range.
link in a webpage, right?
You can.
I'm glad you're okay.
Chat with them.
Me too.
I'm glad you didn't die.
Coming on.
Downstairs,
Are
I
you
was this
muted
close
with
to
your
sepsis.
sound off?
Oh,
I
yeah?
am muted.
No
Well, I'm muted
way.
on the computer
Old-
itself.
Yeah, I
old
went
sepsis ready
I'll
to
make
go.
sure
And
that-
I told the
I
nurse,
don't
I'm like, hey,
yeah,
I need
I'll make sure
Viral and antibiotic Cathalax right now.
Sounds like no. Okay, no, that is.
Why?
You ready?
Showed her and she's like,
Sure.
oh, okay, let's get you seen.
Oh man, I wonder what picture. I bet it was brown recluse. Is it still gross looking? Can I see it?
Not in polite company.
Drop him. Drop him and show us.
Show the public.
I was like, oh man, I'm on a home visit.
Yeah, I see. Okay. I'm muted.
You're doing all right, because we're not getting the
Feedback.
feedback.
I have to find the
worst.
presentation.
All right,
Just
so
the
when we get to item
left-hand
4,
In the middle, down
we
the
can
bottom.
presumably just move to accept Michael's end report as written.
I'm gonna try it.
That's the thing. We don't even have to hem and haw or
We
discuss
don't have
it.
to.
No, we kind of
I mean, we
No,
can do it
Emmy,
No,
have to
no
discuss it
time.
after the motion though.
Yeah.
Right.
But
Or
it sounds like
policies.
we could motion theoretically to not even discuss and just move to accept it and move on.
Well, I mean,
So you move, you second, and then it gets open to discussion, and if nobody says anything, then you're headed off to the vote with it.
Where's it going? Trap shut.
yeah. Yeah, listen to Bev.
Trap shut.
Bev will bend you up. She'll bend your legs the wrong way.
I
Whatever
like
you
my
tell me.
chances.
I'm pretty scrappy.
I believe it.
Oh. Where did I hide my drink? Is that one mine? No?
That one's not mine.
It's not mine.
Yes, it is mine. It's orange, but it's lemonade. I don't
I
understand
had
the
the same one,
connection.
but I finished and reset and put mine away, so.
Interesting. I haven't had that before. Me neither.
I like that because it feels like you're having something extra special. It's not full of sugar.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah.
And a child is allergic to corn syrup, so we can't have soda, so it's a great replacement. 'Cause it's still a fun kid drink.
It's a great way for children
Not to drink sodas to be
It's
allergic
nice
to
that
corn
they've
syrup.
become so popular, like we
Yeah.
have these when we have, or the like, you know, just the flavored sparkling water when we have kids' parties and everybody's excited to have them.
Mm-hmm.
I felt like soda was everywhere when I was a kid, and I
Right.
don't see it anywhere anymore. It's great. Good for us.
Yeah, I didn't see it that much, but
Yeah, we grew up with lots of soda.
I just feel like it was everywhere.
If you had a stomach ache, you had to have soda. I mean, like all the commercials, like Coke and Pepsi, and like, yeah, they really pushed it. I don't know if they still do that online. I don't do online stuff, so I
TikTok or
don't know.
something.
Maybe.
yeah, I don't know,
Yeah.
we don't.
Right, like my
And I
kids
don't
watch
actually
like
taste like
like the
milk.
kids Netflix, which doesn't have ads.
Yeah, I'm not seeing a lot of soda commercials on PBS Kids.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wrong market.
Yeah,
But the soda companies have now, they own like milk, they own juice,
True.
like they own all of those
That's
things,
true.
and so they've just expanded what their market is. I just read a book on this, on our food system and how it's basically owned by
One person.
5 people,
Yeah.
the entire system.
When I've gone to the food and nutrition conference that's held for dietitians and the expo, the first time I went, I was appalled when I walked into the expo because right in front was like Hershey's.
Right.
And I was like, what's Hershey's doing at the food and nutrition conference? And then I walked through and I was just like, oh my God, there's so much like big food industry
Yeah.
influence here. And I was appalled. I was appalled. I was when I was still a student, and I was like, oh, I don't know if I want to get into this.
Well,
Yeah,
I
it's
think
shocking.
we're all back, and so I think this is a good time to jump into Jeannie's presentation.
Hi, everyone.
Hello.
I think I know most of you, but I'm not gonna say all of you. Can we just do a quick, just first name's fine. Martha?
Rachel.
Thank you, Rachel.
Emil.
Anne.
Ray.
Ryan.
Beverly.
Rachel.
Great. 2 Rachels. Glad you're not sitting together. Were you sitting together last year?
Probably
I
over
think
there.
that was
You
confusing
often
to me.
have been.
I we're both from Braintree.
Yeah, okay.
Is everyone in Braintree named Rachel?
No, just a lot of women are, they are.
So, thank you for having me back. It's a wonderful thing. I enjoy your board and I've enjoyed working with Anne and Neil a little bit and Michael. And what I was asked to talk about today specifically is the monitoring process. So that's what I'm here for. If you wanna talk about something else, policy governance, I'm your gal, I can do it. But that's what we're here for today. So what I'd like to do is do a real brief overview, but then I'd like to look at a couple reports and really understand what happens for you when you need to do a monitoring report. You know, what, do you get stalled, do you have questions, do you go beyond, et cetera, and help you work through that. But just to go back to the basics of what monitoring is all about, that's what I'd like to do at first, and point out to you the policies that specifically guide you on how to do the monitoring process. So, sound okay? Okay. So in policy governance, the policy governance policies are the board's way of stating its values, your values, and expectations so that you don't have to reinvent them every meeting. Like, how do we do this again? What do we think about this again? And so the superintendent doesn't have to guess what 8 of you want him to know. Are there 8
There's,
or so?
there's 8.
There's 8, okay. So he doesn't have to guess what 8 different people want. So a well-written policy, and you do have well-written policies, they clarify what the board expects, they delegate authority without micromanaging, and they reduce confusion, repetition, and that on-the-spot decision-making, reactive decision-making. The 2 particular policies, you should monitor all policies. The superintendent is responsible for complying with achieving the ends and complying with the executive limitations that you set. You are responsible for governance process and board management delegation. I'm not gonna spend a lot of time on those tonight, but I can give you a real quick and dirty process on how to just kind of make sure that you're keeping them up to date. It doesn't need to be the full report that Michael writes for you to monitor your own policies. The executive limitations policies are written by the board. It's your expectations. He reports on his compliance on them, but he doesn't write them. He interprets what you write, however. The policies describe the boundaries within which he can operate and make decisions. Executive limitations are primarily focused on the risk, the ethics, and those types of protections and liabilities of the district, and defines any decision, action, or practice that would not be acceptable, even if it works. By having those clear expectations and boundaries in writing, it gives Michael room to make a timely decision and adapt to situations as they arise. Because you couldn't even possibly know after all these years as superintendent what you're gonna face when you come in tomorrow morning. It's just constantly changing. And our legislative session changes it even more on a daily or weekly basis. So you're setting the boundaries. This is what we believe, and these are our expectations for you. And then he has a chance to adapt. So there are 3, under board management delegation is where it tells you how do you monitor policies, why are you doing it, what's it about, how do you do it. Under board management delegation, these are your policies, meaning these are the policies that govern the way you do your work. These are not policies that Michael's responsible for. These are policies that govern the way you do your work. So the first one, and I'm gonna tell you, the next few slides have lots and lots and lots of writing on them, exactly like you're not ever supposed to do in a presentation. I'm not reading them word by word. I'm not expecting you to. These are your policies. So you have access to these policies already. And you can, I think, did you bring, I forget if I asked for policies here.
You didn't, but I'm pretty sure we made
But you
copies
probably
and
did?
they got handed out.
Okay.
Oh,
They
no,
are,
yes, you asked for
Those-
3.
Yes, these 3.
Michael,
Is back up?
And the reason I did is because I knew you weren't gonna read the slides, but if you wanted to look at the policy itself, it's your, starting with 3.2 that specifically speaks to monitoring. So in 3.2, some of the highlights is The superintendent is the board's only link to operational achievement and conduct. I think that's an important point for you to remember. It's you are delegating to the superintendent. The superintendent is then delegating to the resources that he has to carry out the ability to achieve what you want him to achieve. So you're not telling him how to use that human resources director or how to use that transportation director. He decides that. And you're delegating to him. And if you look at number 3 under there, 3.2.3, the bottom one on my slide, the board views successful superintendent performance as demonstrated by accomplishment of board stated ends and avoidance of executive limitations. So you have directly stated, by the way, I'm using your own policies, your own language. You have directly stated in policy that your superintendent is successfully performing his job if he is demonstrating accomplishment of the ends and avoidance of, and compliance with your executive limitations policies. Therefore, the monitoring process is your evaluation process of your superintendent. But instead of doing it 1 week in February, once a year, you're doing it throughout the year because you're looking at monitoring reports each meeting. So think of that monitoring discussion as a mini performance evaluation on that particular point, that particular policy that you're discussing tonight. Each one of those are like little mini performance evaluations as you're reading through his report, asking questions, and then accepting or not accepting the report. Understanding if he's in compliance, if he's not, and we'll talk about that. In 3.3, the board instructs the superintendent through written policies, again, to prescribe the ends and the executive limitations, and allowing the superintendent to use any reasonable interpretation of these policies. And we're gonna talk some more about reasonable interpretation, because this can really get board stuck, that area. The board develops policies instructing the board to achieve specific results for specified recipients at a specified cost. What policies are those? Not you. Is it ends or executive limitations that have specified results for specified recipients at specified cost?
Those are the ends.
Those are the ends. So you're developing the policies describing that, and then you're developing the policies again for executive limitations that limit the latitude. But number 3 stresses again, as long as the superintendent uses any reasonable interpretation of the board's ends and executive limitations policies, then the superintendent is authorized to establish the procedures, make the decisions, take the actions, establish practices in order to be compliant with that policy, as long as they're using a reasonable interpretation. And the board may change its ends and executive limitations policies as your values change over time, as board turns over and you revisit with your community, you can make changes. But whatever was in place at the time of that report is what he's declaring compliance or not compliance with. So if you have a discussion about a policy and you say, well, yeah, that was a reasonable interpretation, Michael, and yeah, I accept that you did it, but that's not what we meant, we're gonna change the policy, then his next report would work to achieve for that new policy. You don't go backwards and play gotcha, that's not what we meant, you know? This is what you said, and it was a reasonable interpretation, we accept this, now we've decided that we wanna change the policy and tweak it a little bit, and then he knows what he's working towards. Does that make sense? And then the last of the 3 policies is monitoring the performance. Again, it's systematic, rigorous monitoring of the superintendent job performance is solely against the expected superintendent outputs, which you have put in writing in ends and executive limitations. And monitoring determines the degree to which the policies are being met. If anything that's not information that helps determine the degree to which the policies are met is incidental information and doesn't need to be in the monitoring report. We'll talk a little bit about that as well. I think Michael's pretty succinct though. I'm not gonna spend a lot of time on this unless you want to. We might touch upon it in the next 45 minutes or so. But there are 3 ways that you can get monitoring information. The most common way, and that packet of reports that you have, is what's called an internal report, where the superintendent makes the reasonable interpretation and then writes the report with evidence to show if he's made it. And that's 97, 98 to 100% of your policies are monitored that way. You could choose to do an external report, where again, the superintendent interprets the policy and you determine an external source to give feedback on that policy. An example of that might be a financial audit. You do that every year. And it's great if Michael comes in and tells you that you're in complete compliance with, the financial practices, but you really might want an external party because of liability issues to come in and say that's true or that's not true. So that's a good example of external. Sometimes I've seen districts use this section for part of an occasional superintendent evaluation, usually not every single year, but maybe cyclically, where you do focus interviews or a climate survey or something like that. That might be an example of an external report. However, Michael could also use that climate survey as evidence in his own report. So that's just who generated it. Did he go for it, or did you generate it? And then direct board inspection. Perhaps you want, this is almost done more for education of the board members, but you might want to have a small subcommittee of the board sit down with Michael and the finance officer to really understand how the process, the purchase order process begins. And, from beginning to end. And maybe that's just something you'd like to understand 1 year, or you've had concerns about it as a board, and so you assign a subcommittee to go in and report back. That's what direct inspection would be like. Not as common, but available to you. And totally, it's up to the board which method you're gonna use. It's not up to the superintendent.
I remember talking about this a little bit last year. Do you have examples of times that's direct inspection been used in Vermont in policy governance for school boards?
That's a really good question. I actually, the closest I've come to experiencing it is sometimes you'll get a board member who, do we have any accountants on this board?
No.
Who is an accountant, who really, really wants to dig into the financial processes and understand them. And they came into totally, there's community chatter about how central office budget is too high. And that's not a particular, there's nothing in your policies that talks about central office budget being X, Y, and Z or a certain percentage or anything. But you do have a policy about budgeting in general. You have 2 of them actually. And so perhaps, and again, I wouldn't do it every year, but perhaps having a subcommittee 1 year and maybe doing it again in 5 years and putting that person on that committee away from the board meeting, sitting down with Michael and the finance officer to understand how the budget process works. And then reporting to the board, we have full understanding now of how it works, and we are confident that we agree with the report that he's being compliant. That's one way to, or maybe there's some community niggling going on and you just wanna look into it. That might be a time when you do a direct inspection. But again, just remember, you're not looking into a particular topic, you're really looking into what your policies say. So you have to keep coming back to if you're doing a direct inspection, you have to identify the policy or the portion of a policy.
It's the board that decides that it's a direct inspection.
That's correct.
It's not 1/8 of the board
That's correct.
that decides.
And
it's happening.
if there is a direct inspection, the board as a whole delegates who's doing that. You could do it all together. You could decide to bring in the auditor, and some districts do, and do a full presentation to the full board. So there's no subcommittee, you're just getting that presentation fully. Does that help?
Yes, yeah, thank you.
Now, I do wanna ask a clarifying question, cause I was somebody that, new to the board last year, and I don't really know a whole lot about budgets. I've been in on several, but I don't really understand it that great. And so I did, I wanted to understand.
Sure.
And I wasn't being able to figure out, and I play with math a fair amount, where these numbers were coming from. So, but when I had, I don't know, 15-20 minute conversation with Robin, she was able to explain, that's this column coming from here, being brought over here, and then it made sense to me. But it was, that's,
So you needed that kind of, and VSBA also provides that, because across the state, there are new board members with a lot of similar topics. So keep an eye on that rotating calendar as well, especially when it comes to
I think what
budgeting.
you're talking about there isn't direct inspection, what you're
Right.
talking
That
about
was
is.
just,
that was just
board
what trying-
education.
Yeah,
You
but
asked
I
for-
could see it having potential overlap, and you mentioned 1 out of 8, and I know I was 1
Oh,
out
I
of
see,
8.
yeah, yeah.
Sure, and the board education in that case made total sense for you, right? And was
You spoke
perfectly
up and
appropriate
stated a
and,
need,
yeah, right.
as opposed to taking the whole board meeting to have that need met. I don't know how it all came about, but we went to Michael and said, I need to understand this, and that's appropriate, but it's not a board, total board direct inspection, that's just helping new members understand the process.
And there are some things like that that don't work in a whole board setting. So when Robin comes in and tries to talk to 8 people all at the same time, it's a very different experience than what Martha is talking about.
Thanks for that example. So in every case, whether it's internal report, direct inspection, or external report, superintendent always is the first line of determining the reasonableness, the reasonable interpretation, but the board then judges whether that's a reasonable interpretation using the reasonable person test. So in college, because you do these silly things when you're a freshman, I memorized this saying, I don't know who said it, but I can still say it. I know you believe you understand what you think I said, but I'm not sure you realize that what you heard is not what I meant. I had no idea in college I was someday gonna be teaching policy governance, but that's exactly it. A board wrote your policies, and Michael has to interpret them. And maybe he doesn't interpret them the way you meant, I'm gonna pick on you, I started with you, but I went to you. The way you meant it to be, or you weren't on the board that wrote it, so it's not what you think the interpretation is. That doesn't really matter. The real question is it reasonable to the words that are on the paper? Reasonable person test. The second part of that is, yes, it's reasonable, but it's not what we meant. Then change the policy, clarify it, add the words you need to make it represent more what you mean, so that the next interpretation is closer to what you mean. I see this happen either with a lot of board turnover, and new board members don't actually read their policies. And so they don't really understand what they're reading in the report, et cetera. Or I see it happen with, I'm sorry, I have the hiccups, ice cream must have done that. I see it happen with superintendent turnover, who wasn't present when the board had the discussion of the policies to begin with. So your previous superintendent perhaps had all the interpretations you wanted. A new superintendent comes in and has a slightly different bent, but both interpretations are reasonable. You're going with his, because that's who's sitting in front of you right now, as long as it's a reasonable person interpretation. And in every case, the standard for compliance is reasonable superintendent interpretation judged with a reasonable person test. Questions about that? Okay. All right.
This to me is the important work that you do, right? Is that if you are at the spot where you're wanting a different outcome, but what I'm doing is reasonable to get to the outcome, then you've either gotta change the outcome or you've gotta limit me in a different way,
They find your limitations.
right? And that's where the power of a policy governance board lays in making those decisions and making those policies.
And again, the last one says you choose the frequency that a policy is monitored and you choose the method that it's monitored. A question I often hear is, something came up on a policy, we might monitor every policy every year, but, we monitored a finance policy in October. And something comes up through the budget process, and you want to revisit that policy. You can do that. You'd have to revisit your own annual calendar. You have to vote as a board to put it on the agenda with enough time for the superintendent to write an updated report. But you can monitor a policy more than once a year if it's a problemsome policy. If you feel that there's a need to bring one back. You don't have to wait for the next calendared go around. You can, that's your purview as board. So, simply put, monitoring is how you know whether the expectations you've stated have been met. For staff, monitoring provides a clear, predictable way to demonstrate to the board how expectations are being met and when they're not. And when monitoring is done well, performance evaluation is no longer a big meeting once a year to brace for. It becomes routine, predictable, less stressful, and changeable as the year goes along. So because you're checking in on these expectations throughout the year, you can make changes without, again, waiting for a whole new contract. So let's talk about the written monitoring reports, and I think he gave you a packet of and we're not gonna read all of those, don't get scared. But I do wanna use one or two of those as examples, and what's actually in a written monitoring report. So the monitoring report, first of all, should restate the policy, because you wanna know exactly what policy, yeah, it looks like, the monitoring reports look like this. They all start with this box at the top. So at the very, very top, he clearly writes what the policy is. The one I'm looking at, because I'm gonna talk about it soon, is 2.5, but policy number is written over here. He started with 2.1 in the packet. It also tells you the time period covered. So when he wrote his first
I don't
reports,
see them in our packet.
not in the packet, you made copies though, right? I know, I saw it on the table. Do I have all of them? No, I have mine. Maybe you just had a couple?
Do you call it? The different monitoring reports on there?
No, so there was this, there was our policies, and then there was our self-eval form.
Okay. Well, I'm gonna show you on the slides anyway.
I have the real version of 2.5, so this was one of the great things.
And here's the early version of 2.5.
Yeah, so do you want me to pass out the,
Sure.
here is,
Well, no, I don't want you to, because it'll be
Okay.
confusing.
okay, then I won't,
Yeah, not yet.
okay,
Yeah,
however you wanna do it.
yeah. You know what I'll do? Well, no. Just stick with me,
Okay.
okay? It looks like this.
You have enough
I was gonna
for
say,
everybody?
we've seen them.
We've
You've
every
seen
month.
them.
We
It's
know
not
what
like
they
you
look
haven't
like.
seen them before, right? You've seen these before. Okay, doesn't matter that you aren't looking at the words right now. But it does have, in the report, after it identifies everything, it has a restatement of the policy, so you know the policy language. That's actually the policy, it's not interpretation. The interpretation and observable conditions actually is the superintendent's interpretation of the policy. Sometimes it includes definitions, it definitely has to include observable conditions. What do I think it would look like in my interpretation if I was complying with this policy? What would you see? What would the outcomes be or the visible evidence be that you would see? So he defines that. He interprets and defines the observable conditions. He often also will put a rationale for his interpretation, such as my interpretation is based on the Human Resources Manual, or Vermont statute, or the Education Quality Standards, or he'll have some or best practices in financial accounting. He'll identify, he didn't just make this up in his head, but he's not gonna give you books to read. He's telling you where it's coming from, and you can go deeper if you want to, but his report doesn't need to be books. They really want a relunch.
It's counting down too, even though you're dismissing it.
Yeah. Then, based on those observable conditions, which in his report, he put A, B, C, He then moves to the evidence or data for each observable condition. So he kind of summarizes that observable condition for A, and he tells you what evidence or data exists for A. And that's kind of the format. I've seen it done a couple different ways. You could do the whole thing at the same time where you have a column for observable conditions and a column for evidence just all up front, right after the interpretation and rationale. But the point is that you can see, not only does he tell you what it's gonna look like, he then proves you're seeing what I told you you're gonna see. And then he gives you a compliance statement. I report I am in compliance with this policy. The compliance statement is either a yes, I'm in compliance, no, I'm not in compliance, or I'm in partial compliance. If he's a no, I'm not in compliance, or I'm in partial compliance, he doesn't need to tell you how he's gonna get into compliance, he just has to get in compliance. So instead, what he's gonna tell you is, I am not in compliance at this time, particularly when a new superintendent comes on board and is trying to figure out systems, this can happen. I am not compliant, or the legislature just changed the law, so now we're not, like COVID, so now we're no longer in compliance. But I expect to be in compliance by 1 month, 2 months, 3 months from now, whatever is reasonable. Then you put it back on your agenda for when he says, and you have him bring back a compliance report then. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and I think we've done that in the
We
last.
did that this.
You did
this
you?
year,
Yeah.
yeah. It was
Yeah.
on the succession.
Well, I know,
Plan.
we're gonna talk about that. Yeah,
Okay.
I just read that tonight. He just showed me that updated report, but that's a good example. Things changed. Your whole organizational structure changed. He was no longer in compliance with the report that he wrote in 2024. So he needed to say we're in partial compliance, but because we've changed the structure, I'm gonna need a couple of months to get us back in compliance. Just a cute little diagram. It starts with his interpretations and ends with results. The point of this slide, which I really meant to take out, is it's not an activities list, it's an outcomes or evidence list. And so that's just a reminder there. Let's talk about treatment of staff, which is policy 2.2. So interpreting a policy doesn't just mean writing it in different words. It really means translating the policy to observable conditions, defining an area, a term if you need to define that term, and making it, this is what I think it means, this is what I think you told me in my college quote, this is what I think you said. Okay, this is what I heard. That interpretation and that report needs to focus on outcomes or conditions, not activities, should be reasonably observed or measured, and reflects the size, complexity, and risk profile of the organization, but also needs to give the board enough clarity to assess compliance. The observable conditions that he lists define what the board will later assess when it reviews the monitoring report, and limits the evidence provided, helping to keep the reports focused and succinct, and not going on and on, like I am, I'm just kidding. So, in this monitoring report, this is one that you actually received from Michael. In 2.2.3, treatment of staff, I just picked this one section out of the treatment of staff policy. And he said, with respect to the treatment of paid staff and volunteers, the superintendent should not allow staff to be unprepared for emergency situations. That's your policy section. He interprets it as all staff. This means, in his mind, that all staff is going to receive training to be prepared for emergency situations that may occur in their workplace. That's an observable condition. Did they or did they not receive training? The rationale is ensuring they have training increases the protections for both staff and students from serious harm. I think I might have reworded that one, but. So the observable condition, again, is what would you expect to see if policy were being followed? 100% of your staff will be trained. That might not be possible on every single day because you have staff who come and go, and they have to be here before you can train them, and they might have missed the big training. But that is what he's striving for. Does that make sense? I mean, somebody who leaves, a paraeducator who leaves in January, and the next training is gonna be March, might have to wait till March, but you've got the bulk of your staff trained. Also defined as recommended in emergency situations as recommended by Vermont Agency of Education. some new emergency might come forward that we don't know about yet, but AOE has a very comprehensive list. His evidence, which I filled in here because I didn't know when you did it. Training was provided to all staff on September 14th and November 7th, designed to help staff avoid and respond to emergency situations. 100% of staff hired as of November 7th have successfully completed the training. That's his evidence. Martha?
So is there a checklist to the comments on the kinds of training that's being provided?
He doesn't need to tell you the kinds of training.
So, I mean, it could be that they're all just getting first aid, but nobody's getting CPR is kind of this.
Good
the
point,
kind of-
good point. So in the first one, 100% of staff would be trained in the emergency situations as recommended by the Vermont Agency of Education. So on the Vermont AOE webpage, under school safety, there is identified situations, which is very comprehensive, that the agency recommends training in. It is not there are, I don't know, I haven't counted, 73 of them. You're not gonna stand up there and train staff on all 73. You're gonna do the very major ones that could cause harm and are unfortunately more likely to occur, and then make staff aware of, here is the list, you know, if you need to go further, and make sure that your administrators and know how to respond to those. But what kind of training is it? Yes. And that's identified by the Agency of Education. And then also, in his evidence, he might say to help staff avoid and respond to emergency situations, he could say that may cause harm to students or something like that. It could be worded that way. But he wouldn't necessarily provide you with the list, the training agenda. He could choose to provide you with the training agenda. But you're not judging the training agenda, because that's his purview. But you want proof that that training is happening, and that's what you're checking the evidence on.
So, for example, if this is what he brings to us and we're like, someone goes and looks at AOE and they're like, I'm certain CPR's on there, so I'll pick it as an example.
Okay.
CPR's not on there. We want you to do the Vermont AOE recommended safety things and CPR. So it's an
Then you're changing your policy.
we're changing the policy. So we accept it for this year, and he knows for next year he's gotta get everybody
Yeah,
trained in CPR.
And you need to actually change your written policy. And when your policy said, allow staff to be unprepared for emergency situations, comma, including CPR, might be a way that you actually put it right in there, because right now, there is no way for him to interpret that you really want CPR unless it's in that, you know, his rationale of what he's going to is that source. And so if you have a board who, district went through a traumatic situation and you wanna make sure every staff member has CPR, then you would write it right in there for the next time.
I think periodically somebody should do a review of the AOE list and make sure that it is comprehensive enough. An area that I think perhaps should be looked over is what paras need to be trained in, because sometimes they end up with a lot more challenge.
They do, and often there's an IEP, an individual education plan, need for additional training for particular needs of students. Right. That's not really what this is about. This is about all staff basic understanding of how to respond to an emergency. But yes.
But there should be
list-
some kind of making sure that the staff that are in those AIE settings do get the training that their AIEs are addressing.
Yes. And that could end up being another example of, in addition, our staff who work with students with specific special education or medical needs will receive additional training beyond that, and that training is provided at the, you know, he could add that. He didn't interpret there here, so having this board discussion and one board member wanting it doesn't mean he's necessarily going to. But if you really have a lot of concerns about it, remember, every time you put a new layer on here, you're restricting further and further what you want him to do. Clarifying but restricting the boundaries within which, you know, so you could add that as a layer and have him report out on it, is what I'm trying to say, but it would be added as a layer unless he's a former special ed para himself. He might think of it, somebody else might not, you know, depending
Jeannie
on
knows
their
that 'cause
lens.
she hired me in that role.
Yeah, but did I train you? At that time, were you trained? I mean, the royal me.
Yes. Yes.
Okay, good, thank goodness. Good questions.
I've
Other
been prepared
questions?
to. And I've seen the bruises and bites and things like that too.
Yeah, my field is special education as well, so. So again, I said this already, so I won't repeat it. So now you have that report in front of you. And you have these questions that you just brought to the table in front of you, and I just read the report. So now what do? Michael puts it in the board packet. It's on the annual calendar of when you're gonna review what policy. He puts it on the board packet. You have read it before you came into the board meeting. Some of them are long. I'm choosing the shorter policies to practice with you. Some of them are long, but it's not the kind of thing you can think about. You're actually evaluating his performance right now, so reading it at the table, I know sometimes it has to happen, but it's not gonna be very effective for an evaluation for him. So you've read it, and you come in, and the board chair manages the discussion with, has everyone read monitoring report 2.2? Is the interpretation reasonable? And open a brief discussion on that, and try to get answers on that. What I see happen is, nobody says anything because they don't have a problem with it, but try to solicit, yes, it's good, yes, it's helpful, yes, I wish I had seen this, which kicks it into a whole other category, but is it reasonable? Yes, but he didn't talk about, yes, but is it reasonable, according to a reasonable person standard? Get to consensus on reasonable. Is the evidence credible and sufficient? Now, credible and sufficient to the interpretation. Again, it might not provide, Martha's example is a good one. She would like to see how paraeducators are trained. She doesn't see that in this report. So she says, no, I don't feel the evidence is sufficient. But you have to go back to the interpretation provided to you that you already said was a reasonable person interpretation. So based on that interpretation, is it sufficient evidence? Does it give you the information you need? Martha has another topic that she'd like you to consider around the policy. Then ultimately, after those two questions, and this is the area that gets sticky for folks, but what you do is you are accepting the monitoring report. You're not approving it, you're accepting it. Acceptance indicates that you feel the interpretation is reasonable, sufficient evidence is presented. It does not lock that interpretation in permanently. That interpretation, even Michael is going to update his interpretations the longer he's in the job and goes, oh, I never really thought about it from this angle. Let me add to that. And he'll tell you so. So they're not locked in just for that report, but it can change in future reports. What if you really don't feel the interpretation is reasonable? Or the evidence, is sufficient. So you accepted the interpretation that staff is gonna receive training, and you have evidence as of November 7th, 100% of the staff on that date was trained, but you feel strongly that as of April 15th, what about that staff? Because you know there's been turnovers. You can ask for an updated report and say, if your board discussion says, I don't feel like we have enough evidence to know if we're really keeping our staff trained and up to date. And if, as a consensus, not as a single member, but as a consensus, the board says, we'd really like this report to come back at the end of the year to see how that training is maintained over staff turnovers.
So now my question is, do we have to make a motion?
Yes,
And it has to be approved by
Yes.
half the board?
yes, yes. Anything that you want Michael to do,
That strays from the annual calendar.
yeah, should be either a written policy or a written motion.
Okay.
Otherwise, it's the opinion of 8 different people. So make motions. if you're directing him to bring a report back with additional evidence in this particular area. And then he knows what you want him to do. Otherwise, he might have heard you differently, or different people interpreted that discussion differently. So yes, your expectations should be in writing, either in policy or in motion. Doesn't take you long to move, second, I'll agree. But the wording of that motion is what he needs, so that he's clear on what you want him to do. In preparing for coming to talk to you, I asked to see his packet of monitoring reports, some of which I'd seen and many of which I hadn't. And what he sent me was his 2024 emergency superintendent succession. It wasn't until I walked in tonight that I realized he had updated it. And I thought, this is great, because the world changed for him after 2024. You no longer had an assistant superintendent. So I kind of want to point that out and walk through a couple things, ask you a couple questions, how you would approach it based on November 2024. So in your policy, you stated that to protect the district from the sudden loss of superintendent services, the superintendent shall not permit the administrative cabinet to be unprepared to take over with reasonable proficiency until a successor is found. To be clear, you find the successor for the superintendent. They're not designating an heir. They're just designating an interim till you can move forward however you need to, or maybe it's a short-term basis or whatever. So his interpretation is the district will appoint and sustain an assistant superintendent fully authorized to assume the superintendent's decision. So he actually interpreted this based on the model you had in place when he was hired in 2024. That there's already, it's a perfectly good interpretation because it existed. And then he goes on to say the individual will be cross-trained in responsibilities of superintendency and kept informed, typo, of ongoing matters and initiatives, enabling them to step into the superintendent's role seamlessly and with minimal disruption. What was a reasonable interpretation in 2024 when you had an assistant superintendent? Was it reasonable for him to include that in his interpretation? It existed. The role existed, so that made sense. Does it identify what the observable conditions would be? Look back
We'd
to that
have
again.
an assistant superintendent that's cross-trained.
Cross-trained, you have one, they're cross-trained, that they're kept informed, some way he'd have to give evidence of that, of the initiatives. Yeah, so he's identified, now this is actually just the interpretation, he would have to put, he actually put, for that one, at that time.
Say, I think all those things were there.
Yeah. He said that the assistant superintendent is hired and in the org chart. That the superintendent is regularly mentored by the assistant is regularly mentored by the superintendent. The assistant participates in regular planning and leadership meetings, making sure they're well informed. And, yeah, 1 and 2, is the rationale, okay. And then the evidence was there. You have an updated org chart that includes assistant superintendent. He provided a superintendent, assistant superintendent mentoring schedule. And he identified the participation in agenda planning meetings, leading curricular team meetings, and participating in leadership team meetings. And he was able to provide dates or notes or something like that. So he had all those pieces. So that was great. But what about when there's not an assistant superintendent? Now again, I didn't know until tonight that you have already updated this. Is that an appropriate interpretation for today? It is not. Now you can pass that out. It is not, because there is no assistant superintendent. You changed the model. Thank you. Give an extra. Thank you. Thanks. There's extra.
There's more, and Jeannie could even have her own.
I can even have my own, thank you.
We'll let you.
Thank you. Remember what I said, don't read this right when you're sitting in a meeting? Well, that's what I'm doing, so. So you can see the policy, you can see the interpretation. under, how does the interpretation, look at the interpretation, and I'll put up the one he had before again. But we just went over it. How's it different now? In 2026, he's talking about what?
Distributed model of leadership.
Distributed model of leadership,
Team cabinet.
using a team or a cabinet. So he's expecting that team will step into place. And how's he gonna help them make sure that they can do that?
So
Martha, go ahead.
Thorough cross-training.
Yeah.
I just, you've referenced a cabinet that you're currently working with, so is there something like that already in place in some fashion?
Yes.
Yes, and this report tells us so, cause he wrote it in December of 2025. Okay, got
And
it.
resubmitted it on 11, because this was an example
Okay.
of,
A report that
on
doesn't.
December 8th,
Mhm.
I had to report partial compliance, and then I would come back in February with a
Good.
full-on plan. And so resubmitted on 11th of February.
So he identified his observable conditions. He notes that the org chart has oversight responsibilities, department building leads are regularly mentored by the superintendent, and department building leads increased responsibility on reporting of ends. And then the administrative assistant has a role to play here, and he gave his rationale. I think in the future, I would suggest the rationale go after the interpretation, and just let the observable conditions and evidence flow. It's not an important point, but I think it just helps the flow. And then he goes to the evidence, and he has updated the org chart, the assistant superintendent's no longer there. He notes that there are operations meetings held every Monday at 1 o'clock, curriculum meetings and individual department and building level mentoring meetings occur, exactly like he said would happen in an observable condition. He notes that there are specific responsibilities to report on ends progress, and the administrative assistant, what her role is as well. And so he's connected the observable conditions to direct evidence. But it's very different from the report 2 years ago, because the world that he's working in is very different from 2 years ago. But he still has a succession plan. Then he notes in his February 11th update, where he reported full compliance, that he has actually designated the high school principal to serve as temporary superintendent if an emergency superintendent succession is required. And so that person then gets additional one-on-one mentoring to make sure that she's up to speed with what's happening, and the administrative assistant as well. So he just notes how he's updated even further, which is a nice plus. I like how he uses notes.
You had the note, I kept the note from
The
December
first.
8th, why we were in partial compliance at that point.
Yes. So, do you feel that in 2026, Michael provided a reasonable interpretation of your superintendent succession policy? By a reasonable person standard? I see yeses, okay.
They approved it on February 11th.
That's beside the point, I'm asking him now. And do you feel that he has provided evidence of how he's gonna meet those observable conditions? How he is meeting, not going to meet, is meeting. Do you see that in the report? So therefore, do you accept this monitoring report? Excellent. You're gonna power off in a second. I'm basically done with, I don't need it anymore. You're recording, right? But I'm still here. So I just have a couple of other questions that I can ask you without you looking at them. So that's the basics of a report. Now, just as a kind of rehearsal, what if he submits a monitoring report that reveals the district is out of compliance, bless you, on student confidentiality and the treatment of records, which was my issue. So there's a particular situation, and he says we're out of compliance, we don't have a system yet to ensure that student records are confidential, which is under one of your policies. What is the superintendent supposed to do at that point?
Tell us when he's
Tell
gonna
us.
be in compliance.
And give you a date when he expects to be in compliance. And what does the board need to do at that point?
Put it back on our agenda for that meeting.
Put it back on your agenda for that meeting, right?
So I kind of have a question on that one as well, because
Yeah.
that kind of sounds like one of those things that doesn't simply violate things we're telling you to do, but things the state and
Federal
federal
law.
government would tell you to do.
Yeah.
So, in that case,
Off with his head?
I mean, what would a hypothetical realistic solution would be? Like if he comes back and says, I can get us there in 6 months, or 3
Sure.
months even, like, even
Next
more.
year, I'll be there next year.
Yeah.
Say, and you're not comfortable with the next year because you know it's a federal law.
Exactly, so what happens then? When I'm like, no, Michael, that's not reasonable.
I think you can do that. I think you can say that. He may say, if he realizes it in June, I mean, like it happened to me when I was new superintendent at Rutland Northeast. Ironically, as former special ed director, I was in charge of systems like that. But as new superintendent, I didn't need to directly know it until I did the INS report. And then I said, wait a minute. I talked to each of the schools and they all had different processes. And I said, this is not okay. Some of you are tracking who's in the file cabinet, some of you are not. Some of you have locks, some of you don't. We're doing one system. So I reported non-compliance in that particular piece of the policy. The rest of the policy was in compliance. If he told you in June and he said, I'll have it in compliance by September, and you want it sooner, that's not realistic because he doesn't have access to the staff who have to put it into compliance. You know, so you have to consider that. If he tells you in November and there's a Christmas vacation in there, keep that in mind. But if you really can push back, if he says, no, it's gonna take me 9 months to build a system to be compliant, you can question that and say, well, I don't think so.
Is there a short-term solution till
You
we
could.
have a longer-term solution?
You
or-
could. And if he says, this is why it's gonna take me 9 months because we have to pass a budget so that I have the software I needed, so is there a short-term solution to bring us more in compliance pending the approval of that purchase?
I'm wondering too, from the state and the federal level, would they, because I know sometimes they'll give you a waiver if there's a circumstance, you know.
Yeah, perhaps, but generally it's not, I can't think of a situation that would be waived completely.
Or maybe just, we're not gonna fine you. or-
Yeah, when they
We're
come
gonna-
and do
because we're
audits, so
gonna-
for example, if the state comes in and does special ed audits and they find that, this is a real situation as well, they found that, in a district after I left, that student special education files were kept with the special educator and not in the counseling office behind locked filing cabinets, et cetera. And the danger of that is they might come back and forth to home, they might be accessible to anybody who roots around on their desk, there's all kinds of confidentiality issues, violations with that. And so the state came in and discovered that, you know, they were randomly pulling student files and they said, hey, where's Randy's? Well, I don't know. Who was Randy's special educator last year? I bet she still has it. And the state said, no, 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 no. So what they did is they gave 90 days or something for the district to get their act together. And then they came back in 90 days and said, now, where's Randy's file? And how about Johnny's too, you know? So that's generally what happens if you have an audit finding, is you have a time period to clean it up and then off with your head.
Comment on this arena. A lot of places do use the cloud for storage. But the cloud is hackable, so it really isn't safe.
So, there is also one of your policies, I think it's asset protection, could include, I don't remember if yours does, if your policy does, but you would want to include in your asset protection, how are you protecting your digital information? How is it protected?
And
how
I
are
look
you
at that with
sec-
student test scores kind of concerns, and that
Yeah.
businesses could
Yeah.
hack into it. and-
Well, Power School, who is the software that the entire state used for a lot of student information, was hacked into at the Power School level. But ideally, the IT person has procedures in place to lock that stuff down. Even though that happened outside of the district level, it wasn't an internal hacking, it was, you know what I mean? It wasn't a hacking of the district, it was a hacking of the software company. And schools were notified, and it was horrendous. That's no different than, you can't protect that somebody's not gonna break in the middle of the night and break the lock on the filing cabinet. You can't, everything. But do you have reasonable protections to prevent that from happening? I mean, the agency of ed's information is in the cloud exists. So what are our protections around the cloud? Here in this district, what is it that we do? And if it's not in there, you might think about, I don't know if it is or not, but if it's not in there, you might have your
Well, we
IT
have
right up.
allow information and files to be exposed to loss or significant damage.
Right, so how is
So-
that defined, and is there these days, adding in the interpretation, and somebody might not think of it, but you wanna add, digital, what you do have is sensitive district data and files are protected. That's an observable condition that was given in January, and you might even go a little bit further as to what that looks like according to, ask your IT person to provide you with verbiage there. Maybe you did, that was only observable, and that was F. So let's see what you did on F. Yeah, he did. So under data protection, information security, there is a blurb on, you don't have this report, you do, but you don't have it tonight, it's 2.6.
Yes, asset protection.
The district implements a comprehensive set of protocols designed to ensure both security and compliance, off-site electronic storage, automatic backup procedures, locking file boxes, fireproof cabinets for physical records, user agreements reviewed, signed and understood, password protected electronic systems, user assigned specific access rights based on roles and responsibilities, training for new faculty, and you might include, you have FERPA and HIPAA and medical confidentiality, you might include electronic as well, just something to throw in there. But you did put a blurb on that, so that's kinda how, the fact is it exists. Whether we like it or not, whether we trust it or not, what are we doing to do the best we can to keep our student information safe? Do we have practices and protocols? Do we have something in place if something goes wrong? We can't stop a fire from happening and wiping out all our paper records. What are our practices and protocols in place to help prevent that from happening?
Can I,
Yes.
it's not necessarily related to what we just talked about, but you were talking about some stuff, and then I remember earlier you were talking about something that Martha had asked, and you said that Michael doesn't have to tell us something.
Yes,
Right.
his operational plan for something.
So the things that you were just talking about with regards to, cybersecurity, can I ask, and two, does he need to or can he tell me? If I wanna ask certain things like, what kind of encryption are we using? What kind of security are we using? Where, when, and how are these backups configured? Those kinds of questions for specifically this kind of policy. Are those things, one, I can ask him, and two, does he have to provide me an answer to them?
I think you can ask, and I would, as superintendent, want to understand your reason for asking. You have a level of understanding that you don't have, or you don't have, just like the accountant example. So, is it because you want to approve or not approve what the process is, or you just want to understand what the process is? Do you see the difference there?
And to be honest, both.
Yeah, exactly, to be honest, Bill,
Yeah.
thank you for being honest. And that's where I'd be uncomfortable as a superintendent. And secondly, and you can tell me this, how much of those answers should be out in public?
All of them could be, and
Could
would
be.
be absolutely no risk whatsoever.
Like what our system is that we're using
Unless he
or-
went with literally the cheapest vendor he could find that has been having a track record of ransomware and leaks for the last 10 years,
Yeah.
absolutely no risk whatsoever.
In which case, I would suggest it's not necessarily part of his monitoring report that he give you that level, nor that he would be expected to answer those questions on the spot at the moment, unless he had his IT director right here to do that for him, because he has delegated that particular task. So then, as a board, you might decide, is this board professional education that you'd like to build in a presentation in the next meeting or so on what your cybersecurity system is? Or would you like Martha did, would you like to ask Michael privately for a 20-minute session with, I know you IT people don't talk in 20 minutes, but you could text. So a 20-minute session with, so that you can have a better understanding. Understanding that your role in that discussion is not to say, well, you're wrong.
Correct, it would be informative.
It'd be, and if you have suggestions, then that's exactly what they are. They are suggestions from a board member that might be helpful, but don't have to be taken. And as long as you understood that part, but you might have an experience that person hadn't thought of yet, and it might be helpful.
And at what point is it appropriate or inappropriate for him to discuss it with the board in some fashion?
Well, then he could come back to the board and say, if he wished, and discuss what? The fact that he met with the IT person and Michael? Or the details?
If he's got suggestions that might improve the scenario, when does that come to the board?
It doesn't.
Unless I wanted to propose changes at an appropriate time.
The operation, how,
No, for future governance policy.
if you have a policy change,
Yes, if I wanted to propose
if you
something.
wanted, then you would ask to have it on the agenda as a policy change. Policy changes, you don't wanna prescribe, use this vendor instead of that vendor. But if you have a policy change, then he would ask to put it on the agenda. If he has suggestions, use this vendor instead of that vendor, you really should do this before you do that. Those are operational decisions that your hired staff has to make. Do you see the difference in that, kind of?
Yeah, and I think you have to be careful too that it's not, that it's like conversational and not instructive from the board, especially if you're meeting one-on-one with somebody.
Right. You're not representing the board at that moment. You're there as an individual.
It almost seems like it would be appropriate for the public comment time, like you're talking as a, not as a board member, but as like a member of the community.
Except he came to got the
Yeah.
information as a board member.
He did, yeah. That would be very confusing for the public, I think.
Yeah.
I
So,
just keep changing hats.
yeah.
So, and I think that's I'm really glad you brought that up, because it's really hard for you, when you're doing school work that's not directly related to your children that are in school work, you're doing board work. Right? And so that's, I think, we talked a little bit about this at last meeting, and I said, well, I don't know if I left that any clearer than it was when I started, but that's the way that I thought about it since, is if you're talking to a staff member and it's not directly related to one of your children, you're probably acting as a board member at that point.
Yeah.
You don't have the luxury anymore of being a curious parent about something that's not
Yeah.
related to your child.
You never give up the right to be a parent.
Right.
That supersedes being a board member. But otherwise, yeah, why are you involved at all, except as a curious board member? But you could come back from that conversation and recognize from your own background that cybersecurity policies have upped a level, and you look at your language and say, I don't see any cybersecurity language at all in this policy. Let's add a bullet that speaks specifically to cybersecurity. That would be an appropriate thing to come back and have a board discussion about. Not what the plan's gonna say, but it doesn't even reference it. And it should, because that's the world we live in today. So I move that the board accept the following language to add to policy 2 point whatever. The board discusses it, after a second, the board discusses it, and if it's accepted, then that helps you, as a board, ensure that cybersecurity is not an afterthought, it's a direct focus.
And we may want to decide before we make any decisions on this, that we bring in our IT personnel so that they can have comment on it, part of the discussion as well.
Sure, or Michael could choose to do that offline at the board's, because policy takes at least 2 meetings anyway. So he could take the language to his IT person and say, is this clear enough? Do you have any input into this?
And that can be done off-cycle.
That can be done offline, yeah. Doesn't have to
Well,
happen
no, I
in a
meant like, it's not necessarily the policy or the ends, not ends report, but it's not a report that is that month.
That's right.
It can be brought up really at any time if you're reading, am I correct? Like if you
Yeah.
read something, you're like, oh my god, there's
Right.
a glaring hole right here.
Right, right. If you
Or-
read that policy right now, I just had it, I think it's 2.6.
2.6.
So go home and read 2.6. And if you feel that it's an area that's missing, and it might be, then you don't have to talk to the IT guy. You can just bring the request to the board to consider adding language to address cybersecurity.
Which is
Julian
important.
and I will put it on the agenda, yeah.
I think it's important even if, right now, let's say that I had put in the interpretation that we use blank, 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 double encrypted, whatever, you know, right? So you got that information from me in the interpretation and the observable condition, but it's not in your policy. But you say,
Expresses
wow,
data.
this was really great, what he shared right here was really great. We should change our policy, we should update our policy to make sure that we're getting that, because that just happened to be Michael Clark's interpretation.
Exactly.
And you just happened to get lucky that was in it,
Exactly.
and that my brain and your brain meshed. If that was something that was really important to the board, then you come back. So even if the report's exactly the way you want it, and you got it, but you only got it by accident, now's an opportunity for you
Yeah.
to fix your policy so that you're gonna get that on a regular basis, so that, you know, if you hire a different superintendent somewhere down the road,
Mhm.
then that helps them, your policy helps me understand what parts, how I need to interpret, how I
Right,
got
what
it.
you need to focus on,
That's right.
what you need to achieve.
And you
Yeah,
have to be careful not
exactly.
to be super prescriptive, but, yeah.
I know that we think computers have been around forever and it feels like it, and, but they actually haven't. And cybersecurity has gotten so much more comprehensive that at the time your original policy was written, it probably wasn't discussed.
No.
And the fact that you even have mention of it in there is because Michael thought of it to that extent. So, you know, that's why you have to, every time that he brings you a monitoring report is also another opportunity to look at your own language.
I think the thing that's interesting for you all to think about in the monitoring reports is, and for those of you that were here on my first view, right, when they were, I don't know, 10, 12, 13, I could make the monitoring report as big as you want it to be, right? And so the more specific you get in your policy, the more specific I have to get in my monitoring report. And so that's kind of the give and take that you're looking at. I remember the first two, and thank goodness Jeannie said, Mike, I've got this template you should
Let's
try
talk.
out. Well, and it was also hard, so when you have a superintendent taking over, right, I mean,
You were
my
brilliant, Jim.
interpretation isn't so different than the last superintendent in most ways, and so how do you create something different? So it
And do you
doesn't just
have
look
to?
like you're copying.
Your
Yeah.
first go-around is almost that, though. You're looking at what was said before, you're sensing, do you agree with it, or do you expand on it? You don't necessarily, it doesn't have to be different, but do you agree with it? But over the next couple of years, you'll start seeing things differently because you've created your own systems,
And you know more.
and you
like-
know more.
Like now, I'm starting to understand, you know, like when somebody starts talking about something that doesn't mesh with one of your policies, I wouldn't have known that necessarily in August of 24, right? I might not have even known it in January 24, I might not even know it today, like I couldn't tell you what executive limitation 3.2 or 2 point whatever, you know, you give, like, I know 2.6 is asset protection because you just talked about it, right? In
2.8 is communications with the board.
2 weeks, I won't remember that asset protection is 2.6.
Yeah.
But I'll remember there are things in asset protection so that when people start saying, hey, we should do this, or shouldn't do this anymore, it lets me jump into the different pieces. Right? So it starts pointing me in that direction, and the longer that you're It's the first board that I'm a policy governance superintendent for, right? So now I don't have to read your mind. You've put out the policies. That's the beauty of working for a policy governance board. When I didn't work for policy governance boards, constantly what I was doing is, what does the board want to do? Because the board can change on a whim. You know, you at least have to have a process when you wanna make change, so that you're putting out there and having a conversation and not retroactively applying what you wished it had been to what actually happened.
Just to wrap up and get to any questions you might have, you mentioned that you have your board self-eval there. You should be monitoring your own reports too. And generally, there's a couple different ways where I've seen that done. It could just be throughout the year, you put a policy on per month and you just read it through and say, what is this? You have a general discussion. That doesn't work too well because people don't want to participate. What I've seen board chairs do is maybe appoint, you take 3.1 and in March, bring us your interpretation of 3.1 and lead the discussion on whether or not, we'll see if we agree with your interpretation, because if we don't agree with it, it means we need to revisit the policy. And let's see whether or not we're doing it. You don't have to write anything, you don't have to write a full report. You know, and then why don't you take 3.2, Rachel, and why don't you take 3.3, Martha, and just kind of do it that way. It's particularly important when you have new board members that somebody sits down and reads the policies with them. And one way of doing that is just build it into your agenda itself. Not your super busy meetings, but, you know, you have 2 sections. You have, I think, 4 policies under the board management delegation. You probably have like 7 policies under board governance. You already go over code of conduct. No. So, it can be much less formal. But if you could keep track of, I don't know if you do this already, first of all, your reports should be public. There's no reason not to put them on the web. Just like your policies are on the web, it's perfectly fine. They're reported in public. They could just, you know, sit there as part of your agenda packets. But having setting up a table that identifies each policy, puts the date of when it was reviewed, and a column saying compliance, yes, no, partial, and if no or partial, then the date that it was reviewed after that. Just, and keeping a running tally of when they're reviewed, so that you know that you're continually reviewing them. By now, you're probably doing a full set a year,
Yeah.
because you've gotten their first part under your belt.
We did a full set every year.
Okay, overachiever.
No.
And do the same for your own. When are you discussing your policies? You don't have to do it as frequently. You don't have to do every policy every single year, but maybe try to do yours every other year or something. Just try to keep them alive that way, and pull them out when you have a situation. That's a whole different training to do with you. Where do you get stuck on monitoring reports? Was this helpful? Did I touch upon any of it? Those 2 questions. It really is, when you have a particular interest, is when it's difficult to know, what do you do? You're bringing a talent to the board, but the board has already hired a staff to fill that role. So how can your talent help that staff is kind of the question. You know, that's an interest of yours, or an interest of yours, Martha, with your special ed questions. Understanding that you've already hired staff to do it. Okay, you've already hired staff to do it. But at the board level, which is the 30,000 foot, how do you make sure that what you're interested in is being done and it's through policy?
So we haven't talked about ends.
Oh, yeah, okay, ends. I'm interested, you said you're doing a report tonight, yeah.
But it's almost 8:30, we
Yeah.
still have
Yeah,
so maybe we can table that for another time.
a
to
shorter,
have you
shorter talk
come
about ends.
in
Yeah.
and talk to us about ends.
Sure.
And then there's that issue of, we get an ends report. Right now, our ends report is like not, the ends report we're gonna see tonight,
Yep.
or except for tonight, is for the 23, 24 school year, is that right? Or is it
Yeah.
the 24,
25,
25?
that's the kids who graduated in 25.
In 25,
And
but
here it
we're
is,
just
26.
finishing the,
Because your data comes delayed.
yeah, yeah, so I'm just curious, how, you know, could we, how do we push that ends report to be more in line with the year that's just finished? Can we do a partial
Yeah.
compliance?
Yeah, you can.
Until that data comes in
You
from
are,
the
you are
state?
receiving quarterly reports on some local assessments. And using those local assessment quarterly reports that come in, you could get partial
Partial compliance, and
Yeah,
then when they
or
come
partial
in and
interim
not-
reports, you can get interim
Yeah.
reports that lead to that final. So you know how they're doing this year, and then at the end of the year, when the data comes in next fall, then you'll get the full look back, but you can get kind of
Give a
current, does that
sense.
make sense to you, Michael? Like if you're doing reading assessments and you're doing,
Yes.
you know, you're probably doing some things.
So we should be directing him though to do an ends report that follows, and not now, we're not gonna do it now, because we're not gonna go back.
Yeah.
But for this coming year, we want you to focus on the 26-27 school year, make your ends.
I think you have to get a lot more clear about what you're expecting in the ends at that point. You're making a pretty,
And I think.
Yeah. Could we
so-
talk about your ends? Like, could we just have you could share with me what you've got? I've also got, a couple of
Yeah.
examples that, now that I can show you.
I think so it depends on what you mean by an ends report,
Okay.
right? I think that's sort of what you're
Right.
looking at, and what interim reports are versus ends report,
Right.
right?
Well,
So-
and I'm talking about what we have for like tonight, that we're gonna be looking at for a second read and to accept. And that is an ends report that looks at the 24-25 school year,
Correct.
sort of adapted from what you said, sort of adapted to our current ends,
Yes.
even though those weren't in effect until last fall.
Yeah.
So it didn't really apply to those students, even though, so it's, you see what I mean?
There is
It's kinda wacky.
there is a mismatch and.
Yeah,
Yeah, we can-
yeah.
I mean, it's
So-
not just you, it's because the data comes out so late.
Comes so late, right, right.
But I think it depends on what the pieces of data that you care about are. If you care about the state report data showing up in
Right.
there, then it matters. If you don't care about the state report data showing up in there, then it's totally doable.
Yeah,
And at some level, if we're doing both at the same time, it's gonna, if you're looking at as detailed of an ends report as we're under the impression that you want, like you got,
mhm,
then that is something different to get quarterly, and it won't have state data if it's in its current year. I think I've said multiple times that it would be better to be in the current year.
and I would agree with that, that's why I'm sort of pushing that a little bit,
Yeah.
because it seems silly, the way we're doing it currently.
Agreed.
So,
Yeah.
okay,
I think I
So-
went over, I'm sorry.
that's okay.
That's okay.
So,
I think it's a conversation that you wanna have not at 8:30, starting at
yeah,
8:30
yeah,
at night.
absolutely, right, that's why I said
Not unless
maybe-
there's a whole lot more ice cream.
Right.
I mean, there might be.
Right,
kind of like
even with it, even with it, I think that would probably be.
Is there
Too
anything
much.
else I can answer for you tonight?
No, I think we're all set. Thank you so much.
Yeah, it's fun to come talk to you guys, you have good questions.
And we'll be in touch with you about the ends.
Okay, yes, yes, we will, we can have a conversation.
All right, Randy, all warmed up?
All right, can we, what is it? I have to use bathroom. Or maybe I just get up and go.
We're talking about the ends report, so you feel okay to,
Yeah, I'll
There's,
just use
there's
that one.
also a
Everybody
bathroom on the
talk
upstairs
loud.
if you want.
I'm not gonna
Okay.
stay for that, is that all right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's all right.
all right, so item number 4, monitoring the organization.
ends report.
I move to accept Michael Zenner's report, second read as written.
I second.
Great, discussion. I actually have a little point of discussion. I was too tired, last meeting to say this in a comprehensive way. When I guess my question is, when I look at sort of what we're in full compliance with, what we're in partial compliance with, I think you have a well-written plan for how to get into compliance. Do you have any thoughts on the timeline? Because when I sort of tally it up, we're in full compliance with 7.5 of 16 points on the end, so it's like less than half.
I would definitely bring back Mindy back to have that conversation with you if that was something that you were looking for more information about.
It's something I'm interested in. I don't know if the rest of the board has interest in it, so I don't wanna push my agenda if the rest of the board feels that.
I think because again, we've changed the ends from when this was written. How similar versus different are the ends and the ones that we are in partial compliance on in this past year, is it even still relevant this year?
I mean,
I
so
guess that's the question.
yeah.
But if yes is the answer to that, then I would be interested as well in knowing what is the timeline for coming up to full compliance. Are we close to that this year?
Yeah, I think there wasn't drastic change, and the board will correct me if I'm wrong, in like the rigorous academic foundation. And
There was not a lot of change in that one.
yeah,
The next two
Two.
sections are brand new.
yeah. So in that, we were fully compliant in the arts, and we were fully compliant in technology, of science and technology, and everything else was partial compliance.
So this is making me think about just when you set academic goals that are ambitious, right? Like whether you're talking about state accountability measures or IEP goals, that often there's like an ambitious goal that you're setting that we wanna get to. And I think that even in the most ideal circumstances, I would think that there would be partial compliance, but that we'd be hoping to see improvement. And I wonder if that's something that we want to try to get in here as either something that we want to see in the report or in the policy, in the end somehow, that we're seeing progress toward these ambitious goals.
I think that's kind of what I'm trying to suggest, is that I think they are ambitious goals, and I think we have a path. But I also don't wanna wait another year to sort of hear how it's going.
And like, is it just partial compliance each time, or is it like, okay, we were at 50% this year and then we're at 60% this next year?
Right, well,
Yeah.
partial
Yeah.
compliance is, we're 90% of the way there, or we're 10%
Right.
of the way there, is
Right.
all partial compliance, and that's a
Right.
wide range.
Yeah.
And so, I guess that's when I've been sort of thinking, when I've been looking at our monitoring reports, really saying like, is this reasonable, like, asking the questions Jeannie asked, and when I looked at this, I was like, ends is really kind of the goal for our district, and it feels like revisiting it again in a year, like, I just feel like they're new, they don't align well with our current school year, like, we don't revisit them for a year, like, you've been giving an end snapshot, which I think is super helpful, but it's not really tied to the data piece.
Well, it's really activity-based and
Right.
Right.
not, so,
Outcomes.
the reality it would be is if I was giving you an ends report, what you haven't received is a robust, here's where we were with our local assessment in September, and then in December, January, and then in April or March. So that's one of the things that Mindy Beth is gonna bring to you, and that's one of the things that investing in EduClimber is gonna bring to you. Because right now, I don't have a really great way for you to see that in a holistic way. With EduClimber, I'm gonna be able to bring you those reports so that you can see, here's the trajectory that's that's happening, you know?
Is
So-
that to the board or is it to the community as well?
Well, it's to the board at a public meeting, so both.
Okay.
I'm happy to sort of, I know we're talking about ends, we will be talking about ends again soon, so I'm happy to table it, but that was just sort of my, like, when I was looking at them, you know, I think that is, if this is the goal is our ends. Are we doing what we say we wanna be doing? And it feels like less than 0.5% is, maybe we could, like,
I think.
but if we're like 0.5% and everything's like almost there, then I feel, you know,
Yes.
less worried about it, I guess. All right, any other discussion?
Well, I wanna see our ends report that is more results-based. The interpretation, it's a lot of words without really a clear, you know, the only, there are a few things that are clear, like 70% of the students will be proficient in things, but throughout the ends report, it's a lot of activities that staff are doing, which has nothing to do with outcomes that students have. And again, that's where I just feel like, we all together need to make sure that we understand, you know, like I was going through and I was like, okay, here's some things that could be an end, like students, what did I write there? Students, I can't even read my own writing. Students, evaluate how to and apply, anyway, there are a bunch of things where you could actually make an outcome statement as your interpretation. But without that, I just feel like it's a lot, it's a bear to read, two, it's a lot of the information was fluff that didn't sort of tell me what the outcome was, what the actual interpretation was. And again, I mean, I don't wanna be overly critical because I think, this has been something, even as a board, I don't think we've been clear about how or what an ends report should look like, so that is also difficult.
I think if you compare this ends report to last year's ends report, I would say this one is more concise and more targeted than last year's. It's still not where,
Yeah, it's not where
So-
I would like it to be, but.
right,
And I think some of that is, our ends are really wide open.
it's very true.
So I think it seems like there's consensus on, we all need to work on the ends and the ends report. The motion on the table is, do we accept the report as it's written? Is there any more discussion?
Well, I'm just wondering about, I guess I would be okay with accepting it if we have in our plan that we're gonna bring Jeannie back, we're gonna, as a board, understand what we need to be looking for interpretations from the superintendent, and the outcomes that we should be looking for. Because this is the meat of what this district is doing, and if we don't have a good grasp on it, I just feel like we have kicked this down the road several times, and I'm not with Michael, I'm referring to even prior to, we haven't really, been ends focused as a board, which is, I think, an important part of what we should be doing as a board.
If I
In
remember
my
correctly, we don't need to accept the ends report, correct?
We don't have to accept the ends report.
What is the consequence of not accepting the ends report?
So the ends report is my evaluation.
Yeah.
And so what I just heard Jeannie say is when you don't accept the ends report, you need to have the rationale and what you're looking for improvement in a clear way so that I can go back and I can improve that.
So I'll start with the questions she prompted us. Is Michael's interpretations, are they reasonable? And is the evidence sufficient for what our current ends are? So just.
And an end is looking at what a student, an outcome for a student, and the interpretations. There are a few interpretations that are showing outcomes for students. There are many that are not. And the evidence is also a little spotty. So I would say it's a partial, in my view, this is a partial ends report. It's not terrible. And I think if we could accept it as a partially completed ends report with the idea that we're all gonna get some further training on understanding how to monitor ends.
So I think
I
it's
think-
kind of a binary decision here. We do or we don't.
Okay.
Yep, and I think, right, like, it's okay to vote,
And I mean, I wanna say that based on my short precedent here with the board and things I've seen from Michael, things I've seen asked of Michael, things I've seen accepted from Michael, this falls in line with what has been acceptable from him. I think that his interpretation based on precedent that he's received is reasonable.
There's a motion on the table.
Is there any other discussion? All right. All those in favor
Of accepting,
of accepting?
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed to accept?
I'm not opposing, I'm gonna abstain.
All those
I can't
present or
first time that's happened
abstaining?
since I've been here.
Is it?
Martha, are you abstaining?
I'm gonna abstain too, and
Okay.
it's just because there's too much nebulous about it in my mind.
So what I'm getting actually is, well, first of all,
I think it passed.
it passed, so there's that. What I also heard in discussion is that there needs to be work done on the ends and there needs to be some better clarity for Michael moving, and us moving forward with what our expectations are for an ends report and maybe some refining of our ends.
Yes.
Alright, and so Jeannie's available to come back to work with us on those things, I think we should take advantage of that. Maybe in August, we could work on appointing an ends committee to do some of that work. Alright, moving on to board process, number 5. August meeting date. I am not available, our regularly scheduled board meeting, and neither is Ann, which was August 12th. So we're proposing, or we'd like to propose a change to Wednesday the 19th. So it would be a special meeting, the agenda would be set ahead of time, so there could be additions. I'm also not available that Wednesday, but Ann is to facilitate the meeting. So, and if that doesn't work, we can look at other dates, it just was trying to be efficient.
I will not be here on the 19th.
That's two.
Ray, just as a side note, if neither one of them are there, you're the chair.
Which is why we decided to maybe offer a
I will
different
be
date.
there on the
So you're
19th.
saying I'd be in charge.
Well, you're welcome to it.
I can, it's a little up in the air for me, I can probably attend remotely.
The 19th.
So-
So I know that we do Wednesdays out of kind of habit,
Mhm.
but we don't have to, correct? So does anyone have a better date where everyone thinks they'd be available?
Has to be before the 11th.
So you're not gonna make the 12th either then?
No, I would not.
Okay.
I mean, if we,
We don't have to have, it's okay to have one board member missing.
yeah, like, as long as we have a quorum,
As long as you have a quorum, so that would be 5.
and one of you two is there.
Just step up, Ray.
And actually, my schedule did change, so I am gonna be available now on the 12th. I'm gonna be a little sleepy, but I'm gonna be here.
So
Right.
then
Ready to run a meeting?
I wouldn't be, Martha wouldn't be. It sounds like it would be better for you. 1, 2, 3, so that's good. All right.
Okay.
Scratch that.
Okay.
No action
So
needed.
we're doing
Nothing,
the
nothing is
12th.
changing. It was the 12th, it remains the 12th.
There we did, is that the meeting we talked about changing location though?
Oh, yeah, we talked about being here just because the schools,
Was on the 19th because it's during orientation, but
But
we,
you, when you look at the annual agenda, I think you moved that up to Brookfield, didn't you?
we did, we took care of that, never mind.
Oh, it's okay, I put this in my calendar a while ago.
I have August 12 at
Randolph Elementary.
on this calendar that was in the
And
packet
at
this
some
week.
point it was, it was RU.
It's everywhere!
So
Everyone go to
Someone
a different
put it
place,
there.
we'll all just,
And it's going to be for pre-roll home anyway.
Okay. Moving on to.
so does it needs to be in Brookfield on August 12th, right?
August 12th needs to be in Brookfield. Or August 12th needs to not be at Randolph Elementary. The floor on the library is completely up and there is stuff in the gym and of course I haven't looked in the cafeteria, but we'll look at it.
It's probably full.
So are we
So,
moving it to Brookfield Elementary?
yes, and I think we could make that, whoever makes the motion for the accepting the annual agenda could just note that one change. Superintendent evaluation.
I move that we add the last acceptance of the ends report onto that evaluation form. And we, confirm that it was, the interpretation was accepted, I believe that's the right language, right? What was it say? The, what was it, the accepted today, the 8th of July. And we accepted all of it, yes. We thought the interpretation is reasonable, yes, and that's the last one. And there was adequate evidence, yes. And that we have you, Emile, the chair, sign off on that evaluation.
Second, I will take a second.
Seconded.
All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Opposed? Abstentions? This is unanimous. Alright, so I can sign that. We need to appoint a Winooski Valley CISA representative.
Last meeting, you talked about Lisa Floyd as a
Mhm.
possibility, and I talked with Lisa, she's happy to be representative if that's what you choose.
Okay, I will move that we nominate Lisa Floyd to be our CISA representative with the Winooski Valley CISA.
I'll second.
Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Any abstentions? Congratulate Lisa on her appointment.
I will.
And then annual agenda, so this is some of what Jeannie talked about, just a quick overview of what we're looking at for the next year as far as what board education is gonna happen, what ownership linkage components happen, different policies that are reviewed, so it's like a month by month breakdown.
It's basically what we use when we're making the agenda. We kind of look through and say, all right, what are we supposed to be doing? So,
I move we accept the annual agenda with the change of moving the August 12th meeting to Brookfield Elementary.
Any seconds?
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Any abstentions? The ayes have it unanimously.
Can I come back and just ask that there's be somehow a way of having a report given to us by Lisa that gives us a sense of an update of what's happening with the CISA meetings in some fashion?
So are you, putting forward a motion?
I guess I am, but I'll have to make it more concise. I move that there be some way of communication put in place, that Lisa will have a report for the board to give us a sense of what's happening at the CISA gatherings.
Second?
Second.
Any discussion?
I don't feel like I would need that information. If I'm remembering correctly, the CISA is the shared services, how we're gonna do regionally shared services among,
And in different groupings than the merger.
But that's all the
Right.
more reason, in my opinion, for having some sense of what's going on and how those pieces are playing out. I don't think we should wait to the very end and say, okay, this is what's happened.
I think Martha's right, we should have some sort of executive summary of what happened.
And it- And she wasn't specific in her motion, so it could be written report or a verbal report or.
Yeah. Something on the record that just clarifies that this is the key takeaway from that meeting when we have.
will you help me remember, what are they gonna be doing at the CISA thing?
So you got it about right, that
Did I
it's
have
shared,
it?
it's
Shared-
shared services in a variety of different areas, special education, business office, transportation.
Resource and
Could be
knowledge
building,
pooling,
right.
basically.
So I left it open-ended as far as how, but do we need something that has a written record
Well,
to it, or?
you also left it open-ended on timing of it and whatnot.
Yeah, I
I
know.
mean, it's, in all honesty, the reason I sat here quietly while that motion happened was because it was so open-ended, and to think that you wouldn't get a CISA report from me about how that's going on. I would think that you would get that under my normal practice. I don't think I've left you I think I would be violating the ends of leaving you, or my executive limitation of leaving you uninformed about
What's going
important
on.
events. So I think all you're doing is reiterating one of the executive limitations that's
Communication to
already
the
on
board,
me.
So I just think-
2.8.
I think the novelty of it had me wondering where this lies, which is why I seconded for the discussion on it.
I
Because
agree.
it's, we're uncertain, you know, like, what is this gonna look like?
Yeah, I
So,
So,
think I would be in violation of the executive limitation if you didn't get that information.
so you're saying you think you're already covering it, so there's no need to duplicate it? Is that what I'm hearing?
I don't think,
Oh.
I think that's what you heard from Michael.
yeah, I don't think it's a duplication, I think you would have gotten it anyway.
Okay.
So now we vote?
Well,
Oh,
I
now
mean,
any more
we-
discussion?
yeah, I'm just kinda thinking, what would I actually want to know? I'd want to know, what are we saving? And what are we losing or gaining through the CISA? Where are we collaborating, and what financial impact is there, or what service impact is there? Do we have better services, do we have worse services? Do we save, we used to spend this much on special education, and now we spend this much, or we used to spend this much on business administration, now we spend this much. Like, do we want all those details? When we do get Michael's report, what do we want from that?
So
What
the
kind of information do you want?
CISA only offers is only set up to offer things. You as a board are gonna actually have to authorize to participate in it.
Okay.
at that time. So I won't have the ability to move you into a CISA for, let's say, business services is one. I'm not gonna be able to shut down our business office and have the CISA do that work. You're gonna have to say, we want these services
And you'll
from the
give us the
CISA.
pros and cons of like, this is how much we spend right now, this is how much we'd spend if we use the CISA. This
Yes.
is how many hours of work we have right now, this is, you give us those comparatives.
I think you would
to
have,
make the
in order to
decisions.
make that decision, you'd have to have that, yeah.
So then we don't need to.
Well, then I don't think we need
Yeah.
an extra report from Lisa.
So we don't have to vote if Martha is satisfied with what Michael said.
No,
she
the
can
motion's on the
No,
table, you gotta
No,
vote.
you
She
can vote
can
mine
withdraw
down and
the
then you're
motion.
just
No,
left with
no,
what
let's
he's
just vote
gonna.
it down, it's
What
much
does
easier.
Sarah tell us?
Okay.
All right.
Or
Any
you
other
can,
discussion?
or you can accept hers and you're gonna get the same thing that you would've gotten anyway. Either way.
All right, all those in favor? Say aye. All those opposed? Say nay.
No.
Nay.
Nay. Any abstentions? The nays have it.
I had to put something there for you to be able to discuss it, and I needed to hear the discussion, thank you.
Thanks, Martha.
I've lost track of where we are. Six, policy decisions for district governance.
This is a first read.
These
So
are all
there's-
first read,
these
there's
are
no
all
action
first
on those.
read.
No,
Oh,
and then
no,
there's
then
a
there's
whole
the
pile from
whole
last
pile
month.
for-
Yep. The second reads.
Yeah, and we need
Um,
action.
I move to accept policy A21, B3, C2, C6, C5, and D5 as written.
Second.
Any discussion?
Can
All
we
the-
confirm that those are the right numbers?
Oh, yeah, since last
I
month.
just remembered, yeah.
I thought during the, didn't we check those when we were doing it?
We, I think we did, but I think it's worth
Double
double
check.
checking.
Starts with A21.
So they start in the neighborhood of page 60-ish.
Oh, these
To be clear, Michael, the information on the last
Oh, A21
would
is on
not
that
be
side.
to manage,
And B.
it would be to understand the impact of the law and the legislation that's coming down, not make operational decisions that you are delegated to make.
And I don't think I'm actually delegated to make it with the CISA.
C6.
I just confirmed them.
Which
I
is
think-
screwy without knowing.
Yes.
Thank you, Ryan.
Okay. That's all the discussion I had.
Okay.
You're exactly right.
B5.
Ray's satisfied in his discussion item. They all match.
Okay.
Ryan flew through into it.
Very fast.
Any other discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
You ran that too quick, I'm sorry. Cause this is the one that I had the question on, the global, citizenship in there somewhere.
That was ends, which we've already accepted.
Alright.
All those opposed? Abstentions? Martha, I missed your vote on the district policies. Did you vote in favor?
The vote was to accept all the policies under second read.
Yes. Okay, great.
Unanimous.
So unanimous. 7, monitoring the board. Delegation to the superintendent, self-evaluation. Which Ann emailed us separately.
Sorry about that. But this one is an easy one, because we're doing all of these things all the time.
I was gonna say, I went through, this one was pretty quick for me, cause I feel like we do, I think this is a topic that we remind ourselves of regularly, of what is delegated to Michael. And what our role is versus his role. Any other thoughts or questions, concerns on that? Alright. Consent agenda.
I move to approve consent agenda.
Seconded.
Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? Abstentions? The ayes have it. Action item recap, we'll connect with Jeannie about, we're gonna keep the meeting as is for next month on the 12th. It is going to be in Brookfield. We will connect with Jeannie about, and it will not be a special meeting, so if you show up and something happens and you need to add something or take something away from the agenda, that's a possibility. And that's a wrap.
Good job, everyone.
If
There
there
are
are
no objections,
If there are no objections, we will be adjourning at 9:03.
9:02, but.
Well, you're living in the past.